Hey everyone, I'm AfterMOON Horrors. Before we dive into the story, I want to know, where are you watching from and what time is it for you? It's always fascinating to see listeners tuning in from different places. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Story number 1. I gripped the steering wheel tighter when I realized I hadn't seen another pair of headlights for more than an hour. The rental car hummed steadily, its engine the only companion in that endless stretch of desert road. I was driving back from a meeting in Muscat, late at night, because my return flight was at dawn, and I thought a quiet overnight drive would be easier than paying for another hotel. The map had shown a straight road through the desert, nothing complicated, but the silence, the sheer vastness of nothing, began to gnaw at me. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 11:52 p.m. I remember it clearly because just before midnight, I heard something that should have been impossible. It started faint, like the wind catching a melody, but then I realized it wasn't the wind, it was chanting. At first, I convinced myself it was the car radio picking up some stray frequency, but I had turned the radio off hours ago. The sound floated outside, thin but rhythmic, like many voices rising and falling in unison. I lowered the window slightly, half thinking it was a trick of my mind, but the sound grew clearer. It was human. Men's voices, steady, repeating phrases I couldn't understand, though there was something ancient in their tone. I told myself, maybe there was a village nearby. I slowed down, scanning the darkness for lights, tents, anything. But the desert was flat, endless, and empty. Sand on both sides, stretching beyond sight, and that chanting rising and falling as if the night itself was singing. My heart started racing. I pressed the window back up and muttered, "It's nothing, just my imagination." But when the digital clock flipped to 12, the chanting shifted. The voices became louder, closer, and the rhythm matched the thump of my heart, like they knew me, like they were speaking to me. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, its headlights cutting into the black, and I kept telling myself, just keep driving, don't think, don't stop. Yet the voices didn't fade behind me, they followed. It was as though they traveled with the air itself. I turned the music on to drown it out. Some scratchy Omani pop station, but the chanting bled through, louder than the singer, as if the radio was only a shell for it. I killed the music immediately, and that's when my skin went cold because the chanting didn't come from outside anymore, it came from inside the car. The sound filled the cabin, not from the speakers, not from the vents, but from the air around me. It reverberated in my chest. A low hum of countless voices echoing off the glass. My breath came shallow. I shouted, "Stop, shut up!" The sound continued, unbroken, as if mocking me. I slammed my palm on the steering wheel, my voice rising in panic. But no matter what I did, the chanting carried on, steady, endless. I gripped the wheel with both hands and forced myself to think. Fear wasn't helping. There had to be an explanation. I told myself maybe I was exhausted, hallucinating. Maybe the desert heat had messed with me. I pinched my arm hard, slapped my own cheek to wake myself, but the voices remained, calm and unwavering, filling the space like unseen passengers. I whispered under my breath, "This isn't real, just focus." But even as I said it, I realized the voices weren't random. They were repeating in patterns, words forming, though not in a language I recognized. Still, the cadence grew familiar, almost like prayers but not ones I'd ever heard in a mosque. Suddenly, a new thought clawed at me. What if they were calling something, or calling someone? The steering wheel vibrated slightly under my grip, and I thought the car was shaking. I checked the mirrors. The rear view showed nothing but darkness. No headlights, no movement, yet I swore I saw shapes shift at the edge of the beams, not figures, exactly, but distortions in the air, as if the desert itself bent inward. The chanting rose, filling my skull, and I shouted again, "Leave me alone." At that instant, the car's headlights flickered, once, twice, then went out completely. The desert swallowed me in pitch black. I slammed the brakes, heart exploding, as the tires screeched and skidded across the asphalt. The car halted, but the silence didn't come back. The chanting filled the dark, louder, closer, now undeniably inside. I reached out blindly, fumbling with the light switch, slapping the dash, whispering desperate prayers. And then, just as suddenly, the lights blazed back on. In the beam of my headlights stood a line of men. At least 20, maybe more, side by side across the road, all dressed in long white dishdashes. Their faces were shadowed, tilted down, but their mouths moved in perfect unison, chanting the same rhythm I'd been hearing. My throat closed. My hands locked around the steering wheel, but I couldn't move. They weren't blocking me by chance. They had been waiting. The chanting stopped all at once. Silence, deep and suffocating. One of the men raised his head slowly, and though I couldn't see his face clearly, his eyes shone faintly, reflecting like an animal's in the headlights. He opened his mouth, and instead of words, I heard the chorus of all their voices echoing together inside my chest. "Join us!" I screamed, slammed the car into reverse, and floored it. The tires squealed, the vehicle jolted backward, and I twisted the wheel, spinning the car half around. My pulse thundered as I shoved it into drive and tore off in the opposite direction, sand spraying behind me. I didn't look back, not even once. But the sound didn't stay behind. It surged again, stronger, filling the cabin with suffocating intensity. I gritted my teeth, yelling like a madman, "No, no, leave me alone!" My voice cracked, tears stung my eyes, and I hit the gas as hard as I could. The speedometer climbed past 120 kilometers per hour, the engine screaming, but nothing seemed to change. The road stretched endlessly, straight, unbroken, like I wasn't moving at all. The desert on either side blurred into infinity. For a moment, I thought I was trapped in some loop, doomed to drive forever with those voices tearing at my mind. Then, through the ringing in my ears, I remembered something. My Omani colleague, just hours earlier at dinner, had warned me not to drive through the desert at night. I'd laughed it off, but he had been serious. He'd said, "There are places the old ones still walk. If you hear them, don't answer, don't acknowledge, just keep driving." My chest tightened. I had already shouted at them. I had already answered. Desperation overtook me. I pulled the car to the shoulder and braked hard. Dust whipped up around me as I killed the engine. Instantly, silence. The chanting cut off like a switch. My chest heaved, sweat soaking my shirt, and for the first time in what felt like hours, there was only me and the tick of the cooling engine. I sat frozen, hands trembling, eyes locked forward. Then came the knock, 3 gentle taps against the back passenger window. I didn't turn. My entire body locked. My brain screamed at me to start the car, to go, but my limbs wouldn't obey. Another knock, closer, right against my ear this time, as if the glass itself had bent to bring the sound near. Then a voice, not a chorus now, but a single, deep male voice, calm and resonant. "Look at us." I clenched my eyes shut, shaking my head violently. "No, no, no." My nails dug into my palms, grounding myself, fighting the urge. I remembered my colleague's words, "Don't acknowledge, don't answer." Yet I already had. What if silence now wasn't enough? The voice came again, firmer, inside my skull rather than outside. "Look at us." With every shred of will I had, I forced my hand to the ignition, twisted the key, and the engine roared alive. I slammed my foot on the gas, eyes still forward, refusing to look at the window. The car lurched forward, and I drove blind with tears streaming, whispering prayers over and over. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I can't tell. But slowly, the chanting thinned, faded, until it was nothing but the engine and my ragged breath. The desert road eventually gave way to faint orange glows on the horizon, the lights of Muscat. When I saw the first gas station, I pulled in shaking, stumbled out of the car, and collapsed onto the ground, sobbing like a child. The attendant rushed over, shouting in Arabic, but I couldn't answer. All I could do was point at the car, still humming as though nothing had happened. The next morning, I boarded my flight, hollow and drained. My colleague met me at the airport before I left. He looked at my face, pale and broken, and he didn't ask what had happened. He only said, "You listened. That is why you returned." I've never driven at night again, not in Oman, not anywhere. And when I think back to that night, I don't remember the chanting as much as the silence afterward, thick and waiting. Because even now, sometimes in the quiet of my room, I swear I hear the first faint notes again, and I know they're patient. They can wait forever. Before we jump into the next story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We really need your love and support. It means the world to us, and you're the reason this channel keeps going. Story number 2. We were already arguing about whether to take the detour when the road signs disappeared. 1 minute the highway was straight and familiar, with the big green boards pointing back toward Plovdiv, and the next we were winding between low hills with no signs, no markers, nothing that made sense. I kept telling Lena that we should just turn around, but she had that stubborn look she gets when she's sure of herself. "It's fine, it's just a country road," she said, and she leaned forward in her seat, as if straining her body could push the little rental car faster into the dark. I gripped the wheel tighter and tried to convince myself she was right, but my stomach felt heavy, like I'd swallowed something too big. I'd driven at night before, plenty of times, but this wasn't just the dark of night. It was thick, pressing, as though the headlights were being swallowed by something that didn't want them there. The dashboard light seemed dimmer too, and when I glanced down at the fuel gauge, I thought the needle had dipped even though we'd just filled the tank in the city. We drove like that for what felt like half an hour. Lena hummed some tune under her breath, probably to keep herself calm, though she'd never admit it. I noticed my hands were damp on the wheel, and every time I blinked, it seemed like the road shifted slightly, like the paint lines had been repainted at a slant. I was about to tell her we needed to stop, just pull over and breathe for a second, when the lights appeared. At first I thought they were distant headlights, cresting a hill ahead. 2 white points, low to the ground, moving slowly. But they didn't move like a car. They swayed left, then right, rising and sinking as though the road was water. I slowed, heart thudding hard, and Lena leaned forward. "Is that someone walking with a flashlight?" she asked. I almost laughed, except my chest was too tight for laughter. Flashlights don't hover in the air. And they don't multiply. Because within seconds, there were more 5, maybe 6 lights, all floating at different heights, circling lazily, weaving around each other like some strange dance. I stopped the car entirely, right in the middle of the road. The silence pressed in hard, the engine ticking faintly. "Turn around," I whispered. I don't even know if I meant to say it out loud. Lena shook her head. "No, wait, just wait. Maybe it's some kind of—" Her words cut off when the lights began to close in. They weren't rushing, but there was no hesitation. A slow drift toward us, from both sides of the road, above the hills, across the fields. My pulse hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. I shoved the gear stick into reverse, but the car jerked and stalled as though something had yanked the power out of it. I tried the ignition again, nothing but a thin, choking click. That's when Lena's humming stopped. She was clutching my arm so hard her nails dug in, and she whispered, "They're around us." She was right. Through the windshield, the driver's window, the mirrors, those lights floated closer, so bright now that I couldn't see what held them, if anything at all. They didn't glare like car headlights. They pulsed softly, like breathing. My head felt fuzzy, as though the rhythm of the pulsing was syncing with my heartbeat. I reached for the door handle, planning to get out, maybe wave, shout, do anything to break this suffocating silence. Lena grabbed my hand before I could. "Don't," she hissed, and her voice had a raw edge I'd never heard before. "Don't leave the car." So I stayed. We both stayed, frozen, while the lights circled us like sharks. The car interior glowed faintly from their passing, shadows sliding across our laps and faces. I swear I felt warmth on my skin whenever one drifted close, like standing near an open oven. Then, everything stopped. The lights froze in the air, perfectly still, surrounding us. And in that pause, something inside me cracked open. Every thought I'd been holding back spilled out. What if we weren't meant to leave this road? What if we never should have taken the detour? What if this was it, the last mistake we'd ever make? The lights blinked, all at once. Off, on, off, on. 4 times, like a signal. Then they moved together, fast this time, blindingly fast, spiraling above us. The entire car shook with a low hum that vibrated up through the tires into my bones. Lena screamed, not a sharp scream but a broken, guttural sound, and I covered my ears. Though it didn't help, the hum wasn't just sound, it was inside me. I don't remember closing my eyes, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up. The car was parked at the edge of Plovdiv, right outside our hotel, the engine cold. Lena was slumped in the passenger seat, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. I shook her hard until she blinked and started sobbing into her hands. I thought maybe it had been a dream, a hallucination, something we both imagined. But when we staggered inside, the receptionist gave us a strange look and said, "Where have you been? You checked out 3 days ago." 3 days, not 3 hours, not even 1. 3 entire days gone. Our phones were dead, their batteries completely drained, though I'd plugged mine into the car charger the night we left. When I finally powered it back up, it jumped straight to the correct date 3 days later, and over 50 missed calls from our families. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe we blacked out? Maybe gas fumes or some carbon monoxide leak in the car? But none of that explained why the tank was still almost full, why we weren't dead from exposure, why our clothes were cleaner than they should have been after sleeping in a car for days. And it sure didn't explain Lena's wrist. The morning after, she noticed it first, a small mark, like a burn or a brand, right on the inside of her wrist. A perfect circle, no bigger than a coin. It didn't hurt, didn't blister, just sat there on her skin like it had always been. She made me check mine, and sure enough, there was one in the exact same spot. We didn't talk much after that. We avoided mentioning the lights, avoided the subject of those 3 missing days. I pretended to focus on logistics, rescheduling flights, explaining to our parents that we'd gotten lost, filling in the gaps with lies that tasted like sand in my mouth. But every night when I closed my eyes, I saw that spiraling dance again, the way the lights blinked in unison. Weeks later, back home, I woke in the middle of the night to find the circle on my wrist glowing faintly in the dark. I scrambled to the bathroom, shut the door, and pressed it against the mirror. It faded slowly, like an ember cooling. I never told Lena. She hasn't mentioned hers either, though sometimes I catch her rubbing it absent-mindedly, her eyes clouded, as if remembering something I can't. And here's the part that keeps me awake. I don't know what happened in those 3 days. I don't know if we were asleep, or somewhere else, or being watched. But I know for certain that we weren't in that car the whole time, because sometimes when I'm driving at night, I'll glance at the rearview mirror and see movement behind me. Just a shimmer, like distant headlights, and every time my wrist burns hot for a few seconds, as though warning me. I've thought about going back to Bulgaria, retracing the road, finding the detour. But then I wonder if that's exactly what they want, whatever they were, whatever they are. Maybe they left us behind on purpose. Maybe they're not finished. Lena and I don't talk about it anymore. We barely talk at all. She doesn't like driving at night, not even around our own town. I don't argue. I just grip the wheel tighter, feel the heat of that brand under my skin, and pray that, if the lights ever come back, they'll take us together this time, because the one thing I can't imagine is facing them alone. Story number 3. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I should have, the leather cutting into the palms of my hands as the truck rattled along the uneven road. Supplies filled the back: bandages, dried food, and ammunition. Nothing glamorous, nothing heroic, just boxes stacked and tied down, bouncing with every pothole. My job was simple: drive them from point A to point B. But alone, in the middle of the night, with war still chewing at the edges of every thought, it didn't feel simple at all. I kept telling myself that this was routine, that soldiers had done this for decades before me. Still, my throat felt dry, and my ears wouldn't stop straining for something, anything out of place. The road twisted through the countryside like a wounded vein. I had been down it before in daylight, but at night the familiarity vanished. Landmarks disappeared, replaced by vague shadows that stretched and shifted whenever my headlights moved. I focused straight ahead, keeping my mind clear, not allowing the thought of landmines or ambushes to crawl in. But then I heard, it just faintly at first, carried on the rhythm of the engine, a voice. My name, spoken as though someone stood only a few meters away. I flinched and turned my head, but the road was empty. The voice had been soft, almost a whisper, but so unmistakably familiar that it cut through me like a blade. I told myself I was tired, hearing things, that long hours without sleep had a way of twisting reality. I took a deep breath, shook my shoulders loose, and pressed harder on the accelerator. That's when I heard it again, clearer this time. Marco. The way it stretched, the way it lingered, it was the exact voice of Stepan, my friend who had died just weeks earlier in a mortar strike outside Vukovar. My stomach tightened into a knot. I had been at his side, seen the blood, heard the silence when he stopped breathing. He was gone. And yet, here in the middle of this lonely road, his voice was calling my name. The hairs on my arms rose. I forced myself not to stop, not even to glance too hard at the ditches or trees. But the next moment, the headlights picked out something on the roadside. A figure, standing still as a statue, face turned toward me. For an instant, I was sure it was him. Stepan, in his uniform, watching me pass. My body wanted to slam the brakes, to jump out, to run to him, but instinct screamed louder, "Don't stop!" I drove past, eyes fixed ahead, but in the corner of my vision, I swear his head turned to follow me. Breathing became difficult, every inhale sharp and shallow. My mind rushed through possibilities. Maybe I was losing it, maybe fatigue was dragging me under, maybe the war had finally cracked me open. But the voice came again, this time not just from one side but both, as if more than one person stood out there. "Marco, over here." Another voice joined, a voice I recognized as Luca's, another comrade buried months ago. My pulse hammered in my ears. They were dead. They couldn't be here. And yet my body reacted with the same instinct it always had when they called an urge to follow, to obey. Up ahead, the beam of my headlights fell on something unnatural. The road, which should have wound downhill toward the supply post, instead seemed to veer toward a cluster of ruins. Stones, arches, the remains of a church, its walls broken, its roof gone, standing like a corpse of a building. My chest constricted. I had no memory of that ruin being there. But the voices, all of them now, urged me forward. Familiar names, familiar tones, the men I had eaten with, joked with, bled with. Each syllable was like a hook in my chest, tugging me toward the ruin. The truck slowed, though I hadn't eased my foot. It was as if the vehicle itself decided to obey. The headlights caught the broken steps of the church, and I saw movement in the dark archway. Silhouettes shifted, some stepping forward, some waiting. I could not see their faces, but I knew them, every one of them. Friends I had lost since the war began. Men torn apart by grenades, shot down in alleys, buried in shallow graves. My heart stuttered. They were all here, gathered like a family reunion. I muttered under my breath, "This isn't real. This can't be real." My voice shook, unconvincing even to myself. One of them stepped forward, into the edge of the light. His face was pale, his eyes dim but steady, and it was Stepan again, just as I had remembered him in his last moments, only cleaner, calmer. He raised his hand, gesturing for me to stop. And for a second, against all reason, I nearly did. I nearly killed the engine, jumped down, and went to him. But something in the back of my head screamed that if I left the truck, I would never leave that place again. They were not my friends anymore. Whatever these things were, they only wore the skin of men I had loved. My grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles burned. "No," I said aloud, forcing my voice strong. I pushed my foot down hard on the accelerator, the truck roaring forward. The figures didn't move out of the way. Instead, they seemed to multiply, filling the road ahead, lining the path into the ruin. Their mouths opened, their voices layered over one another, pleading, commanding, coaxing. "Stay with us, Marco. You don't need to go back. It's over. Come home with us." My chest ached with longing. The thought of being with them, of laying down my burden, was almost beautiful. But survival screamed louder. I braced myself, aimed the truck straight ahead, and plowed through. The figures dissolved as the headlights touched them, fading like smoke. The voices cracked and warped, 100 names collapsing into a howl that rattled inside my skull. I shouted at the top of my lungs, half in rage, half in terror, and kept the wheel steady until suddenly the ruins were gone, the road straightened, and silence fell so suddenly it was deafening. The truck roared on, unchallenged now, the night returning to the empty quiet it should have had all along. My breathing came in ragged bursts, sweat dripping down my face, though the air was cold. I forced myself to keep going, not daring to look in the mirrors, not daring to slow down until I saw the first flicker of light from the supply post ahead. Guards stepped out, rifles slung over their shoulders, casual, unaware. To them, I must have looked insane as I stumbled from the truck, face pale, hands trembling. They asked if I was all right, and I muttered something about being tired, about the road being rough. I didn't tell them what I'd seen, what I'd heard. How could I? They would never believe it. Or worse, they would believe me. That night, lying on the thin mattress in the post, I stared at the ceiling for hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, my friends waiting in the ruin, eyes steady, voices warm. A part of me longed to have stayed, to have stepped out and joined them. But the deeper part, the instinct for survival, knew what I had felt in my bones. They weren't my comrades anymore. They were something else, something that had borrowed their faces and voices to lure me in. And if I had gone with them, the truck would have been found abandoned, supplies scattered, me vanished without a trace, just another casualty of war with no explanation. Even now, years later, when I tell this to you, I feel the weight of it pressing in. I wonder if that ruined church truly exists on some forgotten road outside Dubrovnik, or if it was built for me alone, stitched from grief and exhaustion. I wonder if those voices will call me again one night, when I'm older, when I'm weaker, when I'm closer to their side than my own. But most of all, I wonder if they were offering me comfort, or if they were hunting me. I'll never know. All I know is that I didn't stop, and that decision is the only reason I'm here now, speaking to you. Story number 4. I raised my arm half-heartedly as the dust-covered sedan slowed down on the shoulder of the highway. My friend Dean nudged me, whispering that we were lucky anyone even stopped this far out. We'd been walking for over 2 hours, packs digging into our shoulders, the endless straight road stretching through the Australian desert with no end in sight. The driver leaned across and pushed the passenger door open, his grin wide and oddly reassuring. "Heading east?" he asked, voice low but steady. We climbed in without hesitation. Hitchhiking was always a gamble, but it was 1,995, and this was Kalgoorlie country, endless roads, mining trucks roaring by, and not much else. The man introduced himself as Ray, shaking Dean's hand firmly, his grip cold and stiff. When he turned to glance at me, that's when I noticed it. His left eye was glass. The iris was pale blue, too perfect, and it caught the sunlight like polished stone. It didn't unsettle me right away. People lose eyes, accidents happen. Still, I looked away quicker than I meant to. The car smelled faintly of oil and something metallic, but the air conditioning worked, and we were grateful. He asked where we were from, where we were heading, the usual questions. Dean did most of the talking, explaining we were backpacking across Western Australia, working odd jobs, hoping to get as far as Adelaide before winter. Ray nodded along, smiling faintly. He didn't say much about himself, only that he worked in transport and that he'd been on the road for years. At first, the ride was a relief. The rhythm of the tires on asphalt and the cooled air almost lulled me into comfort, but after an hour, small things began to gnaw at me. He never blinked with the glass eye, of course he couldn't, but it was the way he didn't blink much with the other one either. He drove steadily, both hands locked on the wheel, gaze fixed ahead. Whenever Dean cracked a joke, Ray smiled just a little. Too late, as if he had to remind himself that was the right response. I caught myself staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His good eye flicked up and met mine, and for a split second, I felt pinned, like he was holding me there. He chuckled, softly, like he'd caught me out. "Long roads make people stare," he said. It wasn't threatening exactly, but the way he phrased it made my stomach tighten. 2 more hours passed. Dean eventually nodded off against the window, leaving me trapped in silence with Ray. I tried to close my eyes too, but I couldn't relax. Something about the steady hum of the engine, the unchanging desert, and his controlled breathing beside me felt unnatural. Then he spoke again, quietly, almost as if he was talking to himself. "Most people don't like the night out here. Too many stories, too many disappearances." I forced a laugh, weak and dry. "Yeah, I heard it can be dangerous." He smiled at that, not turning his head, just stretching his lips. "Dangerous if you stop." The weight of that hung in the car. I didn't reply. Instead, I glanced back at Dean, wishing he'd wake up. My own thoughts were running circles. Was this just a strange man making small talk? Or was there something deliberate in the way he said it? The sun sank, painting the desert dark. By then, we'd been in the car nearly 5 hours. I asked casually if we could stop soon, stretch our legs, maybe grab a bite if there was a roadhouse ahead. Ray nodded once but didn't answer. Another half-hour passed, no sign of stopping. The road ahead remained a ribbon of black. Finally, Dean stirred awake and asked where we were. Ray said, "About 80 kilometers from the next town. We'll make it soon enough." His voice was calm, but his knuckles had whitened on the wheel. That's when Dean whispered to me, "Mate, did you see that? Both his eyes in the mirror just now. They looked the same." I snapped my head up. In the dim glow of the base's dashboard, I saw it too. Not just the glass eye reflecting faintly, but his real one glowing as well, pale white, as if it had lost all color. He didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge it, just kept driving, steady as ever. Dean and I exchanged a look, both of us too shocked to speak. My throat went dry. I wanted to rationalize it. Maybe the headlights of an oncoming truck had reflected weirdly, but no trucks had passed for miles. The glow had been internal, unnatural. Ray finally broke the silence. "You boys ever seen something you couldn't explain?" His voice was level, but I swear I heard amusement underneath. Neither of us answered. Dean shifted in his seat, his breathing quick. I forced myself to ask, "What do you mean?" He chuckled softly. "Things people see on the road, things that follow you, sit in the back seat, watch you when you're too tired to notice." His words were slow, measured, like he'd rehearsed them. I turned to glance at the back seat, even though I knew it was empty. The hairs on my arms rose. Dean muttered that maybe we should stop, maybe get out and camp the night. Ray shook his head. "Bad idea. Things are worse when you stop." The road stretched endlessly, no towns, no lights, no exits. My pulse thudded louder with every passing minute. I whispered to Dean that we should make him pull over. Dean nodded, though his face was pale. I leaned forward slightly. "Hey, could you drop us at the next stop? We'll find a place to rest." Ray didn't answer right away. He kept driving, eyes locked ahead. Then, slowly, he turned his head, both pale eyes catching me full in the face, glowing faintly in the dim cabin. "There isn't a next stop." My stomach dropped. Dean grabbed my arm, whispering frantically that we needed to get out. I reached for the door handle, but it didn't budge. The lock had no knob, just a flat plate. Child locks. I hadn't noticed before. My chest tightened. Ray's smile widened. "Don't worry, we'll get where you're going." The car sped on, faster now, the engine growling. I looked around desperately for something, anything, the window crank, a way out. Dean tried his door too, same problem. He swore under his breath, voice shaking. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Ray's tone was calm, almost kind. "Because people always ask for a ride. They never think about who's driving." Dean lunged forward suddenly, grabbing the wheel. The car swerved violently, tires screaming against the asphalt. I shouted, my body thrown sideways as Ray wrestled the wheel back. His face twisted but still composed, those awful white eyes glaring. The car fishtailed, then slammed hard onto the gravel shoulder. Dust exploded around us. Dean fumbled with the lock again, kicking at the door. This time it popped open with the impact. He shoved me out first, both of us tumbling into the dirt. We scrambled up, sprinting blindly into the dark desert. Behind us, the car idled, headlights glaring into the dust. For a long second, I thought Ray would chase us, but he didn't. He just sat there, silhouette motionless. Then, slowly, the engine revved, and the car pulled away, vanishing into the endless road. We didn't stop running until our lungs burned. Finally, we collapsed onto the ground, gasping, surrounded by silence and blackness. No towns, no lights, nothing but the road far behind. Dean was trembling, muttering, "His eyes, mate, both of them, I swear to God." We spent the night huddled in the dirt, too afraid to sleep. Hours later, just before dawn, a trucker spotted us walking and gave us a lift to the nearest roadhouse. When we told him what happened, he frowned but didn't seem surprised. He said people vanished out there sometimes, that the desert swallowed them. I've replayed that night 1,000 times since. I tell myself, maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe the headlights made his eye look wrong. But Dean remembers it the same way I do those two glowing eyes, watching us like we were already dead. I never hitchhiked again after that. Even now, whenever I drive at night and catch someone's reflection in the mirror, my chest tightens. I know what I saw wasn't natural. That wasn't a man with a glass eye. That was something wearing the shape of a man, hunting the roads where no one can hear you scream. And we were lucky, so unbelievably lucky, that we got away before he decided to stop driving. Story number 5. I was still annoyed with myself when I pulled into the empty lot and saw the ferry terminal lights go dark. I had been a few minutes late, maybe 10 at most, but the last ferry had already gone. My plan was simple: cross the water, reach the small guest house on the other side, sleep, and continue my journey the next morning. Instead, I sat in the car, staring at the shuttered building, trying to decide whether to sleep in the back seat or take the long inland route through the forest. I chose the road. It seemed easy enough, just a few extra hours of driving. I convinced myself it would be fine. The first half hour was quiet, just me and the car gliding over narrow roads lined with trees that seemed to lean in closer with every mile. My GPS signal flickered in and out, but I had already checked the route beforehand, so I wasn't worried. When the needle dipped near half a tank, I started watching for a gas station. A few minutes later, one appeared like a blessing in the dark. A small station, one pump, fluorescent lights humming faintly. No one was there, but the pump worked, and I topped up. Feeling relieved, I bought a bottle of water from the unattended machine and kept going. Not long after, I turned onto a different road, certain I was following the signs correctly. 10 minutes later, my headlights washed over the same tiny gas station. I laughed out loud, more at the strangeness than anything else. The forest roads twisted and doubled back, so it wasn't impossible. Still, I was careful this time, checking the road sign twice before choosing another direction. I drove longer, 20 minutes maybe, and just as I started thinking I had finally made progress, the familiar outline of that pump appeared again. The same dull fluorescent glow, the same cracked concrete pad, the same vending machine with its humming refrigeration unit. I sat in the car for a minute, engine idling, staring at it. My first thought was that I'd made a stupid mistake, and circled back, but I hadn't seen any intersecting roads, no chance to loop. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I tried to rationalize it, muttering to myself like someone rehearsing excuses. I forced myself to focus harder, studying each turn. I slowed down, memorized the trees, counted the distance between signs. For a while, everything seemed different, even reassuring. Then the road bent, and I saw it again, that pump, that light, that machine. I stopped in the middle of the road and felt my skin crawl. It wasn't just repetition. The half-empty water bottle I had thrown onto the passenger seat earlier was gone, and when I looked over at the vending machine, I could see the same brand of water sitting behind the glass. A single empty space in the row where I had taken mine. I stepped out of the car, leaving the door open, and walked toward the machine, as if touching it might explain something. The humming grew louder the closer I got, louder than a vending machine should be, almost like an engine buried underground. I reached for the glass and then froze. My reflection wasn't moving in sync with me. It lifted its hand later, slower, as if deciding whether to bother imitating me. I stumbled backward, scrambled to the car, and slammed the door shut. My breathing was shallow, my throat dry, and the fuel gauge mocked me, still showing 3/4 but already feeling useless. I drove fast after that, not caring about conserving fuel, just desperate to get away from the loop. Every time I saw another curve ahead, I begged silently for something new. Twice I thought I had escaped, only to round a corner and see the glow again. Each time it was exactly the same, except for small details. Once the vending machine was completely dark, unplugged, but the station still lit. Another time the pump handle was resting on the ground, dripping fuel onto the concrete, though no one was around. Hours seemed to pass, though my dashboard clock insisted it had been less than one. The dread became a weight in my chest. I stopped checking the GPS. It was stuck at a frozen screen that refused to update. My phone had no signal. The realization that I might never leave that road pressed down on me until I was shaking with a kind of quiet panic I hadn't felt since childhood. At one point, desperate for proof that I wasn't insane, I pulled the car right up to the station and stepped out again. I smashed the vending machine glass with the tire iron from my trunk. The shattering sound echoed unnaturally, bouncing back too quickly from the trees, as though the forest itself had walls. I grabbed a bottle, opened it, and poured half out on the ground before taking a sip. It tasted normal. I put the rest on my passenger seat and drove away. I swore I wouldn't stop again until I saw a village or another vehicle. When I inevitably returned to the station, the machine's glass was whole again, and yet the same brand of bottle sat open on my seat, half empty, exactly as I had left it. My legs went weak. I wanted to scream but only managed a broken laugh that turned into sobs. Something was rewriting the world around me, and I was a character stuck in its draft. Fuel dropped below half. My options shrank with the gauge. At some point, I thought I saw headlights in my mirror, a faint pair of beams weaving through the trees behind me. Relief surged, but when I slowed, the lights slowed too. When I stopped completely, the lights vanished. My hands trembled so violently I had to keep them clenched to hold the wheel. I tried driving with my eyes partly closed, forcing myself not to look at the road signs, as though not acknowledging them might break the cycle. But the road still bent, and the pump still appeared, waiting like a stage set rebuilt for each act. This time, though, someone was standing near it. A woman in a long coat, hair covering her face, motionless in the humming glow. I braked hard, tires squealing, heart pounding. I didn't move. My instinct screamed at me to turn around, but I forced the car forward slowly, inching closer. When my headlights swept fully over her, there was no one there, just the same cracked concrete. By then, I couldn't tell what hour of the night it was. The forest had no dawn, no change. My eyes burned with fatigue, but sleep was impossible. I decided on one last gamble. Drive straight past the station, faster than before, without slowing, without thinking. I pressed the accelerator until the engine roared. The trees blurred, the road whipped beneath me, and I kept going long after my gut told me to stop. 10 minutes. 20. My knuckles were white on the wheel, and then, mercifully, the outline of buildings appeared ahead. I nearly wept when I saw the cluster of houses, the dim porch lights, the shape of a small inn with a sign out front. I pulled over, jumped out, and staggered to the door. Inside, an old man looked up from behind a counter, startled by my appearance. He spoke Finnish, words I barely understood, but I begged in English for a room, for help, for anything. He handed me a key and pointed upstairs. I didn't argue, just stumbled into the room, locked the door, and collapsed on the bed fully dressed. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the curtains. Actual sunlight. I rushed to the window and saw the town alive, people walking, children running. My car was still outside, mud splattered but ordinary. Everything looked normal again. I checked my phone, the date hadn't changed. It was still the same night I'd missed the ferry. My fuel gauge read exactly 3/4, unchanged since before the nightmare began. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, stress, imagination twisted by the dark. But when I looked at the passenger seat, the half-empty bottle of water still sat there, warm from the sun, its cap cracked just the way I had opened it. That was the moment I knew I couldn't explain it away. I paid the innkeeper, drove to the next ferry, and left Turku behind without looking back. I've never spoken of it until now, but when you ask me why I don't like driving at night anymore, this is the reason. I can't pass a gas station without feeling the air tighten in my chest, waiting for the hum of that vending machine, waiting to see my reflection move just a second too late. Which story setting scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. Story number 6. I was already running late, and I knew I shouldn't have taken the back road. My colleagues had warned me that the route through the countryside near Mataro was unreliable at night, but I wanted to get home faster. I remember gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, the old Renault rattling as it rolled over uneven pavement. The road was narrow, lined with low stone walls, and my headlights barely seemed strong enough to cut through the darkness. I kept telling myself it was fine, just another 30 minutes, and I'd be in my flat, with a cup of tea and my lesson plans spread out on the kitchen table. That thought kept me steady until I saw them. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. My eyes caught shapes ahead, small figures shifting at the edge of the road. I slowed down instinctively, my heart tapping a little faster, and when the beams of the car finally swept over them, I saw 3 children. They stood barefoot on the roadside gravel, their pale feet almost glowing against the dust. 2 boys and a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, their hair unkempt, their clothes thin and out of season, as if they belonged to another time. They waved their arms at me, frantic but silent, and every instinct I had as a school teacher screamed at me to stop. I pulled over, the tires crunching against loose stone, and leaned toward the passenger seat to roll down the window. My first thought was that they'd been lost from some nearby farm, or worse, abandoned. "Estáis bien?" I called out, my voice trembling even though I tried to sound calm. "Do you need help?" They didn't answer right away, just stood there, staring at me with those wide, shining eyes that caught the light but didn't reflect it like normal eyes should. Then the girl stepped forward, her bare feet scratching against the gravel, and said in the softest, most deliberate tone I've ever heard, "Don't stop again." I swear to you, I felt that sentence hit me in my chest like a fist. It wasn't a request, and it wasn't the kind of thing a child says when they're frightened. It was a command, one spoken with an authority no 9-year-old should ever carry. I froze, my hand still resting on the gear shift, my mind buzzing with confusion. "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning out of the window further, but she just shook her head, lips pressed into a thin line. The boys didn't move at all. They just stared, their faces slack but intent, as though they were studying me. For a moment, I thought perhaps they were playing some cruel joke, maybe local kids trying to spook passing drivers. But as I looked closer, I noticed details that chilled me more than their words. Their feet were raw, cut open by stones, yet they stood without flinching. Their clothes looked handmade, old-fashioned, like something from a photograph taken decades ago, and their silence, except for that one warning, felt heavier than the night itself. I shifted uneasily, ready to drive away, when the girl suddenly raised her arm and pointed down the road behind me. "They're coming," she whispered. My mouth went dry. I turned in my seat, peering through the rear window, but all I saw was the same stretch of darkness I just traveled through. No headlights, no movement, nothing but the hum of cicadas. When I turned back, the children were gone. I mean gone, as if they'd never been there. The gravel was undisturbed, the roadside empty. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached, trying to make sense of it. Every rational part of me screamed to drive, to not think about it anymore. But another part, the part that had stopped in the first place, kept wondering if I'd really seen them. I pressed my foot to the pedal, the car lurching forward as I forced it back onto the narrow road. My ears strained for any sound beyond the engine, for footsteps, voices, anything. But there was nothing but my own uneven breathing. A few minutes later, just when I was convincing myself I'd imagined it, I saw something in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was my imagination again, a trick of fatigue. But then it became clearer, a shape on the road behind me, moving fast. Too fast. It wasn't a car, there were no headlights. It looked more like a group of figures, running, their outlines blurred by distance. My stomach flipped, and I remembered the girl's words, "Don't stop again." My foot slammed harder on the gas, the engine whining in protest as I pushed the old Renault faster than I'd ever dared. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but the figures didn't shrink in the mirror. They were gaining, I whispered to myself. It's not real, like a chant, hoping to steady my hands. But then, out of nowhere, something slammed against the back of the car. The whole frame shuddered, metal screeching as if something had dragged claws across it. I nearly lost control, my hands wrestling the wheel to keep from skidding off the road. Heart pounding, I glanced back again, but the mirror showed only empty road. I could still feel it though, the vibration, the weight of that impact lingering in my bones. Minutes stretched like hours, every turn of the road tightening my nerves until I thought I'd break. The air inside the car grew thick, suffocating, and I swear I could smell something faint and sour, like earth turned over after heavy rain. Then I heard it, small voices, whispering in unison. They weren't outside. They were inside the car, surrounding me, though I was utterly alone. I gripped the wheel and shouted, "Stop it! Leave me alone!" My voice cracked, desperate, but the whispers only grew louder, a chorus of children repeating the same words over and over. Don't stop again. I don't remember making the last stretch into the city. One moment, I was on that dark road, my knuckles raw from clenching the wheel and the places. Next, I was pulling up outside my building in Madero, gasping as if I'd been running. I stumbled out of the car, my legs shaking so badly I had to lean against the hood. When I finally looked back at the Renault, my breath caught in my throat. The entire rear end of the car was scarred, deep gouges etched into the metal like something had clawed at it. I reached out with trembling fingers, touched the torn paint, and felt a shiver run through me. That was no trick of the mind. Something had been there. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen, every light on, staring at the car keys on the table. The voices still echoed in my head, the warning repeating itself in that soft, unnatural tone. By morning, I tried to convince myself I was overtired, that the damage on the car could have been from an accident I hadn't noticed before. But when I returned to the parking lot later that day, the Renault was spotless. Not a scratch, not a dent, as though nothing had happened at all. I stood there for a long time, unable to breathe, my mind turning over the impossibility of it. I told no one at first. Who would believe me? A schoolteacher, respected in town, claiming to have been chased by barefoot children and unseen claws on a back road? I forced myself back into routine, back into the classroom, back into marking papers and organizing lessons. But every time I stayed late at school, every time I faced the decision of which road to take home, I remembered. I never drove that route again. Not once. The years passed, and I tried to bury it. But then, one afternoon in the staff room, an older colleague was telling stories about strange things he'd heard from locals back in the 70s. My ears pricked when he mentioned the countryside near Madero. They used to say, "Children walked those roads," he said, sipping his coffee like it was nothing. Children who died in the Civil War, left with no shoes, no graves. Folks said they stopped cars, begged for help, but if you listened too closely, you'd never make it home. He laughed lightly, as if it was only folklore. But I sat frozen, the cup in my hand shaking. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say, I saw them, I heard them, I know they're real, but I stayed silent. The story belonged to me alone, as much as it terrified me. And now, when I think back on that night, what haunts me most isn't the voices or the scratches or the impossible vanishing. It's the look on that little girl's face, the weight of her words. Don't stop again. Not advice, not a threat, just the inevitable truth. Because deep down, I know if I ever see them again, I won't be able to drive away. And that night, by some mercy I don't understand, I did. Story number 7. I was halfway through my route when I noticed something that didn't make sense. The road stretched wide and steady ahead of me, the old Valparaiso highway I had driven so many times I could picture each bend with my eyes closed. The hum of the engine beneath me was steady, comforting even, and the passengers behind me mostly workers returning from Santiago, a few students. An older couple had been chattering quietly when we left the city. That was less than an hour ago. Now, as I checked the mirror, the bus seemed too still. People were in their seats, but no one shifted, no one leaned against the glass, no one coughed. The mirror caught their faces in little fractured reflections, pale and unmoving, and I felt my stomach twist. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they were asleep, I told myself. Long day, long ride. I even muttered it under my breath, like saying it out loud might convince me. But something about the way they sat didn't look like rest. Their heads weren't tilted, their chests weren't rising. They were sitting straight, like mannequins, like people waiting for something. My hand gripped the steering wheel tighter. I told myself to just keep going, get to the next stop, drop them off, and not let my imagination wander. But I couldn't stop looking up at the mirror, checking again and again, hoping to catch someone move. No one did. By the time I reached the long curve near Casablanca, my nerves were buzzing so hard my teeth hurt. I pressed the brake, slowing down more than I needed to, and pulled the bus onto the shoulder. The engine rumbled low, the headlights spilling onto the dark stretch of road. My hands were sweating so badly the gearshift slipped under my grip. I turned in my seat and forced a voice out of my throat. "We've stopped for a moment. Everything all right back there?" I expected someone to nod, maybe complain, maybe laugh at me for sounding nervous. Nothing, not a sound. I stood up, and right then, I swear my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. The aisle stretched too long, every step a fight to keep going. I passed the first row, 2 young men with work boots still dusty from their shift. They stared straight ahead, eyes open, lips slightly parted, but not a breath, not even the smallest flicker of movement. My throat closed, and I leaned close, waiting for the faint warmth of air against my hand. Nothing. They were cold, not icy but wrong for living bodies. I stumbled back, bumping into a seat, and the thud echoed through the silence like a gunshot. I wanted to run, just leap out of that bus, and sprint down the road until my lungs gave out. But I couldn't leave without checking. I forced myself down the aisle, seat after seat, touching shoulders, pressing fingers to wrists. Every single one, the same. Eyes open, silent, still. A teenage girl clutching her school bag. An older man with his hat still on his lap. A mother with her arms stretched across the seat beside her, as if protecting someone who wasn't there. None of them breathing. None of them alive. Yet they hadn't been that way when we left Santiago. I had heard their voices. I had seen them shift, dig for change, smile tired smiles as they climbed aboard. I know what I saw. By the time I reached the back row, my legs were shaking so hard I had to grip the poles for balance. I whispered to myself, over and over, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But it was. I could smell the faint scent of sweat and clothes, the cheap cologne someone had worn, the faint rubber tang of the floor mats. They were here. They had been here. And now they were, I don't know. Bodies without life, but not corpses either. Their skin hadn't gone gray, their muscles hadn't slackened. They looked exactly as they had 30 minutes earlier, except for the one thing that mattered. I bolted back to the driver's seat. I needed air. I yanked the door lever and the bus door swung open with a hiss. The highway was deserted, the night pressing heavy around me. No cars, no voices, just that wide Chilean road cutting through the dark hills. I stepped out, gripping the railing to steady myself, and tried to breathe. My mind was spinning, trying to grab onto some explanation. Gas leak? No, I was fine. I was standing, breathing, alive. A hallucination? I kicked the gravel under my boots and felt it scrape. Too real, too sharp. I climbed back in, slamming the door shut like I could lock the night out. My hand went to the radio, fumbling to call in, to tell dispatch something had gone horribly wrong. Static. No matter how I tuned it, no voice came back. Just that raw, jagged hiss that filled my ears until I wanted to rip the thing from the console. I killed the engine instead, plunging the bus into silence. It was unbearable. I had to start it again just to have the sound of the motor keep me company. That low hum felt like the only heartbeat left in that vehicle. And then, as I sat gripping the wheel, the mirror shifted. I hadn't touched it. It tilted down slightly, giving me a wider view of the aisle. For the first time since I stopped, something changed. The passengers' heads, every single one, turned toward me in unison. Slowly, smoothly, as though pulled by invisible strings. Their eyes, already open, now seemed focused, every gaze locked on me. I couldn't breathe. My hands froze on the wheel, but my foot slammed the accelerator on instinct. The bus lurched forward, tires spitting gravel, and I swerved back onto the highway, driving blind with panic. They didn't move otherwise, didn't rise from their seats, didn't open their mouths. Just watched. I drove faster than I ever had, curves blurring, the hum of the engine screaming as I pushed it. I don't even remember the kilometers passing, only the endless weight of their stares burning into the back of my head. My chest was tight, sweat pouring down my back, and all I could think was, get to Valparaiso, get to people, get away from this. The lights of the city finally came into view, flickering yellow against the coast. Relief should have come then, but it didn't. Because when I glanced in the mirror again, the seats were empty. Every single one. Just rows of fabric and headrests. No boots, no bags, no school satchel, no hat. Gone. As if they'd never been there. The bus smelled hollow now, like metal and diesel, no trace of human life. My hands were trembling so badly I almost missed the exit. I pulled straight into the terminal, parking crooked, leaving the engine running as I stumbled out. Other drivers and attendants rushed over, shouting at me about my parking, about my face maybe, but I couldn't hear them properly. I just kept repeating, they were here. They were all here. I opened the doors, showed them the empty bus, babbled about the passengers who had been breathing one moment and gone the next. They stared at me like I'd lost my mind. They checked the log. Yes, I'd signed on. Yes, the route had been scheduled, but they told me no one had boarded, not a single ticket sold for that run. I argued. I shouted. I begged them to believe me. I described the girl with the satchel, the mother, the old man with the hat. They shook their heads, uneasy, maybe pitying. No records, no witnesses, no missing persons reported. Just me and an empty bus. For weeks, I didn't sleep properly. I'd close my eyes and see their faces, frozen, then turning. I stopped driving for months, couldn't even walk near the terminal without my chest locking up. Some nights I hear it still, the low rumble of the engine, the silence of breathing that isn't there, and the sound of seats filled with people who shouldn't exist. I told myself maybe it was exhaustion, maybe I'd imagined it. But then, one night, sitting alone, I unfolded the crumpled receipts I'd found stuffed in the cracks of seat cushions when I cleaned the bus before turning it in. Ticket stubs, dates, times, names. None of them matched the company records. None of those passengers were supposed to have existed. And yet, I can still feel the weight of their eyes on me, even now, as if I never left that road at all. Story number 8. I had barely been paying attention to the GPS when it told me to take the next left. My son, Michael, was fiddling with his old MP3 player, the tinny sound of some band bleeding from his earbuds. We were on our way back from a day trip near Loch Fyne, and I was tired, more eager to get to the B&B than to admire another winding Scottish road. The GPS chirped again, and I turned the wheel, trusting the little voice without thinking twice. At first, it seemed like a shortcut. The road narrowed almost immediately, but that didn't strike me as strange. In Scotland, you get used to single-track roads where one car has to pull over if another is coming. Still, this one felt different. No markers, no signs, just a strip of cracked tarmac swallowed by overhanging trees. The branches reached low enough that I instinctively ducked once, as if they could touch me through the windshield. "Dad," Michael said, pulling one earbud out, "are you sure this is the right way?" "It's what the GPS says," I replied, though I didn't sound convinced. He leaned forward, peering at the glowing screen. "But, look, there's nothing on the map, just a line." I glanced at it and frowned. He was right. The road was there, but it was thinner than the other routes, almost like the GPS had drawn it as an afterthought. My first instinct was to turn back, but the road was too narrow, boxed in by dense trees. Reversing several hundred yards in near darkness didn't appeal to me, so I pressed on, telling myself it must reconnect somewhere. The car rattled as the surface grew worse, pebbles crunching under the tires. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter. The trees thickened around us, their limbs twisting together until the night seemed to fold inward. There was no shoulder, no openings, just a tunnel of branches. Every so often, I glanced at Michael. He had stopped listening to music and was staring straight ahead, jaw tight. "This is dodgy," he muttered. "Yeah," I admitted. After what felt like 10 minutes but might have been less, the road ended. Not gradually, it just stopped. The car rolled onto a clearing dominated by a sagging cottage, its roof caved in on one side. The windows were gaping holes, and the door leaned as if someone had kicked it in years ago. The road didn't continue past it. My headlights washed over the stone walls, casting long shadows into the trees. "Well, that's that," I said, forcing a laugh. "We'll just turn around." I shifted into reverse and pressed the pedal. The engine roared, but the car didn't move. I tried again, harder. Nothing. The gear stick felt stiff, like it was fighting me. My palms grew damp. I checked the handbrake down. Tried first gear, reverse, back again. The car shuddered, but stayed planted. "What's wrong with it?" Michael asked, his voice higher than usual. "I don't know," I said honestly. I killed the engine and started it again, hoping it was just a glitch. The dashboard lit up, the engine hummed, but when I shifted into gear, it refused to budge, as if the tires had sunk into something unseen. I climbed out to check. The night air was damp, carrying the sharp scent of moss and rot. My shoes sank slightly into the soil, soft but not muddy enough to trap a car. The tires looked fine. I crouched, running my hands over them. Clear. I circled the car once, flashlight from my phone cutting across the clearing. Everything looked ordinary, except for the cottage. It loomed at the edge of the light, more ruined than I'd thought, the stones weathered, roof beams jutting like broken ribs. Michael rolled the window down. "Can you fix it?" "I don't see anything wrong," I admitted, walking back. "Maybe it's a gearbox issue. We'll try again." Inside, I turned the key, shifted, and pressed harder. The car jolted but didn't move an inch. My chest tightened. Machines can fail, I knew that, but this felt different. The engine was working, the gears engaged, the wheels spun faintly, yet the car was as rooted as the cottage. Michael whispered, "Dad, look." I followed his gaze to the GPS. The screen, which had shown a thin line moments before, was now blank. No road, no arrow, nothing but a gray void. I tapped it, restarted it, but the map refused to load, just empty space. A slow unease settled into me. I told myself not to panic in front of Michael, so I put on a steady voice. "We'll wait a bit. Maybe it's an electrical fault. We'll try again in a few minutes." But as the minutes stretched, the forest grew louder. At first, it was the normal night chorus, crickets, the occasional hoot. Then it shifted. The rustling came in patterns, like footsteps crunching through undergrowth. Once, twice, then stopping. I strained to listen, but silence pressed back. Michael's face was pale in the glow of the dashboard. "There's someone out there," he said. "Animals," I reassured him, though I wasn't convinced. I reached for my phone to check for a signal. 0 bars. Michael's phone was the same. The realization hit me harder than I expected. No car, no GPS, no signal. We were cut off. I swallowed and decided to check the road again. "Stay here," I told him. "No way," he protested, unbuckling his seatbelt. We stepped out together, our phone flashlights slicing thin beams through the clearing. The trees seemed closer now, their trunks packed tighter, as if they had shifted while we weren't watching. I shivered despite the mild night. I tested the road behind us, running my hands along the surface. Still solid tarmac, no slope, no mud, nothing that should hold a car back. I kicked at the tires again, uselessly. Michael hovered near me, turning in circles with his light. "Dad, did you hear that?" I froze. From the direction of the cottage came a faint creak, wood straining against weight. Then a thud, like a door closing. The building was derelict, no doors left standing. My mouth went dry. "Back in the car," I said sharply. We locked ourselves inside, both breathing harder than before. I started the engine again, more desperate this time. It revved strong, eager, but the car refused to shift even an inch. My knuckles ached from gripping the wheel. Then came the tapping. Light, deliberate, on the back window. Michael gasped and scrambled toward me. I twisted around, but the rear window was black. Nothing visible, just the faint reflection of our faces. The tapping stopped. "Who's there?" I shouted before I could stop myself. No answer, only the forest, dense and waiting. Michael whispered, "We shouldn't have stopped here." "I know," I said, my voice cracking. Another sound came, not tapping this time, but a dragging noise across metal. The roof groaned, the car shuddered. Michael clutched my arm. I didn't move, too afraid of what I might see if I looked up. The sound stopped as suddenly as it began. Minutes dragged. Neither of us spoke. My thoughts spiraled. Maybe it was a prank, maybe locals messing with us. But how could they make the car stay put? How could they vanish so fast? Finally, I forced myself to act. "We're leaving the car," I said. Michael shook his head violently. "No, no, no. What if? We can't sit here forever." I cut in. "The road wasn't that long. We walk back, we find help." He hesitated, then nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. We packed quickly, phones, wallets, the flashlight. I left everything else. As soon as we stepped out, I locked the car, though I knew it was pointless. The forest closed around us as we walked, every sound amplified. The road stretched longer than I remembered. 10 minutes passed, then 15. My legs ached, but there was no sign of an opening, no hint of the main road. Worse, The trees on either side leaned tighter, their branches nodded overhead. Michael clutched my hand like he was 6 years old again. "We didn't walk this far to get in," he said. "I know," I admitted, voice low. Then we saw it headlights. Dim, distant, but real. Relief crashed over me. I broke into a run, dragging Michael with me. The lights grew brighter, resolving into a car approaching from ahead. But that was impossible. The road had ended at the cottage. The vehicle stopped a few yards away. I shielded my eyes from the glare. The driver's door opened with a creak. Out stepped a man. Ordinary looking, in work clothes, but something about him was wrong. His movements were stiff, mechanical. He didn't acknowledge us, just walked past, toward where our car had been. Michael whispered, "Dad." I grabbed him and pulled him off the road into the trees. We crouched low, hidden by undergrowth. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give us away. The man reached our car, climbed in, and without hesitation, it started. The same car that had refused me again and again. He reversed smoothly, headlights sweeping over the cottage before disappearing down a path that hadn't been there before. We waited long after the lights vanished. When I finally dared to move, I found the road behind us open again, as if it had never been blocked. We stumbled forward, half running until we burst onto the main road, where familiar signs guided us back. When we reached the B&B, I didn't tell the owner what happened. I barely slept, replaying it over and over. In the morning, I walked to the car park. My car was there, clean, undamaged, as if it had never left. The GPS worked again. The road wasn't on it. To this day, I don't know who that man was, or why the car wouldn't move for me but obeyed him. All I know is, whenever Michael asks about that night, I tell him the truth. The scariest part wasn't the sounds, or the tapping, or the cottage. It was realizing that something had decided we weren't meant to leave, and something else had decided to let us go. Story number 9. I was laughing so hard at something Marta had just said that I almost missed the exit. She reached over, tapping the dashboard with her nails, like she always did when she wanted me to focus, and said, "Pull off here, I'm starving." It was close to midnight. The road between Salamanca and Zamora was nearly empty, and we had been driving for hours. When I swung the car down the ramp, the glow of the truck stop lit up the dark in a way that felt almost welcoming. Neon letters buzzing faintly above the building spelled out Café Estrella. I remember thinking it looked too bright for such an isolated stretch of road, but I didn't care. My stomach had been growling since the last gas station, and Marta was already unbuckling before we even parked. Inside, the place was warm, buzzing with fluorescent lights that hummed faintly overhead. A jukebox in the corner rattled out some outdated Spanish pop tune, and there were maybe 4 other people scattered around. A trucker hunched over his plate of eggs, a woman in a red scarf sipping coffee by herself, and a couple in their 50s, sitting close but silent. It all felt ordinary enough, though the air carried a faint metallic tang that I kept noticing even while I tried not to. Marta didn't seem to care. She slid into a booth by the window, grabbed a menu, and started listing everything she wanted out loud, like she always did to make me laugh. We ended up ordering sandwiches, fries, and 2 Cokes. The waitress was tall, pale-skinned, and her hair looked almost too black, like she'd dyed it with ink. She didn't smile once, just scribbled our order and shuffled away without a word. As soon as the food came, Marta tore into hers, but I kept catching myself watching the others. The trucker never looked up, not once, even when his fork scraped too loud against his plate. The woman with the scarf kept her eyes fixed on her cup, her lips moving slightly like she was whispering something under her breath. And the older couple, God, the way they both stared at the salt shaker between them without speaking, like it was the only thing in the world. I told myself I was just tired, maybe reading too much into nothing. Marta nudged me with her foot and said, "Eat, you're gonna faint." So I forced myself to. The fries were soggy, the Coke tasted flat, and I couldn't shake that metallic taste, stronger now with every bite. When we finished, Marta insisted on grabbing a chocolate bar from the vending machine near the bathrooms. I fished out coins while she leaned against the wall, yawning, already talking about how we should make it to Zamora before 2 if we didn't stop again. I laughed, fed the coins into the machine, and handed her the candy. We walked to the door, still talking. The second I pushed it open, my chest tightened in a way I'll never forget. There was no parking lot, no neon sign humming above us, no trucks lined up, no glow spilling across the pavement. There was only an open field, flat and endless, stretching out under a sky so black it almost looked solid. My car was sitting there alone, exactly where we'd left it, but it was the only thing there. Marta froze. She didn't even breathe for a second. I stepped back inside, but the second I crossed the threshold, the cafe was gone too. It wasn't even a building anymore. Behind me was nothing but the same empty field. The jukebox, the waitress, the stale fries, all of it had vanished like it never existed. Marta grabbed my arm so hard, her nails dug in and whispered, "What the fuck is happening?" Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. My mouth went dry. I didn't have an answer. We ran for the car. My keys rattled in my hand, and I dropped them once before I finally managed to get the door unlocked. We scrambled inside, slammed the doors shut, and locked them. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to fit the key into the ignition. The engine started, but the headlights didn't show a road, only grass and dirt stretching forever. I spun the wheel, searching for any sign of the highway, but it was gone. Every direction looked the same. Just grass, flat and endless. I pressed the gas, and the car bumped forward, wheels crunching dry soil. Marta was crying now, quiet at first but then louder, saying over and over, "We shouldn't have stopped, we shouldn't have stopped." I kept telling her to breathe, that we'd figure it out, but the truth was, my own chest felt like it was caving in. After maybe 10 minutes of driving with no change, I pulled over. The gas gauge ticked lower, and panic gnawed at me harder. Marta wiped her eyes and said, "Call someone." I pulled out my Nokia, praying for signal, but the screen just flashed sin cobertura. Marta tried hers. Same. No coverage, no bars, nothing. It was like we'd slipped off the map entirely. She curled up in the seat, clutching her knees, whispering something to herself like a prayer. I wanted to scream, to hit the steering wheel, but I kept forcing myself to stay quiet. If I lost it, she'd lose it too. Then we saw the light. It was faint, far out in the field, like a lantern swaying in the dark. Marta sat up instantly, her nails digging into my arm again. "Do you see that?" I nodded, throat too tight to speak. Against all reason, I drove toward it. The car bumped and jolted over the uneven ground, but the light stayed in front of us, never closer, never farther. It swayed, like it was being carried, but no figure appeared around it, just the glow, bobbing gently, leading us. I don't know why I followed it. Maybe because it was the only thing that wasn't endless black. After what felt like hours, the light vanished, just blinked out. In its place, I saw asphalt glinting under the beams of my headlights. The road, our road. I slammed the brakes, then the gas, then brakes again, unsure if I was dreaming, but it was there, familiar, cracked, with the faded white line down the middle. Marta sobbed, laughing at the same time, and grabbed my hand so tight I thought she'd break my fingers. I didn't care. We were back. I sped onto the highway, not even checking which direction, just driving as fast as the little car would take us. We didn't speak the rest of the way. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see that cafe behind us, glowing in the distance, but there was nothing except the ribbon of road stretching on. We reached Zamora just before 3 in the morning. We checked into a cheap hotel, and only when the door was bolted did we finally let ourselves collapse. Marta curled up under the blanket fully clothed, and I sat at the little desk staring at the car keys in my hand, trying to convince myself it had all been real, that we hadn't lost our minds. The next morning, we drove back the same route, broad daylight, sun blazing down. We passed every exit we had taken, every signpost. When we reached the spot where Café Estrella should have been, there was nothing, just dry grass and open sky. No building, no foundation, no sign that anything had ever been there. We even asked at a gas station farther down. The clerk looked at us blankly when we mentioned the name, swore there had never been a cafe like that between Salamanca and Zamora. Marta went pale. I felt something in my stomach turn cold and heavy, like a stone. For years after, I tried to make sense of it. Maybe we both hallucinated. Maybe exhaustion played tricks. But then how did we both see the same thing? The same waitress, the same jukebox, the same soggy fries? How did we step outside and find our car exactly where we left it? And the light, the swaying lantern, what was that guiding us back? I still don't have answers. Marta refuses to talk about it now. If I bring it up, she changes the subject or leaves the room. I can't blame her. Some nights I wish I could erase it too, but sometimes, when I'm driving late, I catch myself scanning the roadside for a glow that shouldn't be there. And I swear, just once last summer, heading toward Lyon, I saw neon letters flicker faintly in the distance. My chest clenched, and I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing myself to keep driving. I didn't stop. I'll never stop again. Story number 10. We were laughing in the car when it started, half drunk from the festival music still ringing in our ears, the taste of cheap beer on our tongues. Anna leaned her head against the open window, letting the summer air slap her hair into her face, and I reached over to tuck it behind her ear. We were young, just 22, thinking the world would stay as bright as those lanterns we'd seen hanging in Koblenz streets. Then the sound came. A child crying, thin and sharp, cutting through the hum of the tires. At first, I thought it was from the festival, some echo carried over the river. But when Anna sat up straight, her face pale, I knew she'd heard it too. The road stretched onto the bridge, empty and long, and the crying came again. It was impossible to mistake a child, maybe 5 or 6, sobbing like their throat was tearing. "Pull over," Anna whispered, and I could hear the tremble in her voice. I slowed the car, the tires grumbling against the concrete, and stopped right in the middle of the bridge. The crying was louder now, though there wasn't a soul in sight. My hands gripped the steering wheel harder than I meant to, knuckles stiff. "Do you see anyone?" I asked, leaning forward to peer through the windshield. The road ahead was empty, the guardrails gleaming under the scattered lights. No child, no shadows, nothing but the river below, black and endless. Anna shook her head. "It's right here. It's close." She opened her door before I could stop her. I hissed her name, heart kicking against my ribs, but she stepped out, clutching her cardigan tight around her shoulders. The crying dropped in volume the moment she moved, like the sound was retreating. I got out too, calling, "Hello? Is someone there? Do you need help?" My voice bounced back at me, stretched and warped by the emptiness of the bridge. No footsteps, no reply. Just a low sobbing that seemed to float back and forth, never settling in one spot. Anna's eyes scanned the pavement, her lips pressed white. "It's a child, I swear, I can feel it." That word "feel" made something inside me twist. It wasn't about hearing anymore. She felt it. I walked to the edge of the bridge, leaned over, and looked down. The water was black glass. Nothing there, no movement. Just my own reflection, rippling as though the river didn't want to hold it steady. The crying swelled again, now behind us. I spun around so fast I nearly slipped, but the road was empty. "Get back in the car," I said. "Now." Anna didn't argue. She rushed into her seat, slamming the door. I followed, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The moment the engine roared back to life, the crying stopped. Silence. Almost a relief until it began again, this time inside. It was faint, like it was trapped somewhere in the car's body, deep behind the dashboard or inside the trunk. A child weeping, muffled but close, inescapable. Anna clutched my arm, nails digging through my sleeve. "Oh my God, it's here, it's with us." I hit the gas, the car leaping forward, and the bridge lights blurred past us. But no matter how fast we drove, the crying stayed. It wasn't behind us anymore. It was around us, like the car itself was carrying the sound. Anna started begging me to stop, but I couldn't. My brain was a storm of thoughts. Was there actually a child hidden in the car? Could someone have crawled inside at the festival? It made no sense, but I had to know. I pulled into the first lay-by past the bridge, killed the engine, and jumped out. I tore open the trunk. Empty. I checked under the seats, the glove compartment, even patted down the carpet. Nothing. Just the sound of a child crying, echoing softly in the car as though the seats themselves were sobbing. "Please," Anna whispered from inside. "Please drive. Please don't leave us here." I slid back in, defeated. The sound grew louder again the moment I shut the door, as though it was waiting for me. Anna had tears on her cheeks, and I couldn't tell if they were hers or if she was reacting to that impossible crying. We drove in silence, both of us gripping our own terror, until we reached her apartment in the outskirts. The crying never stopped. It followed, winding through the gears, the vents, the upholstery. When I turned the engine off, it didn't fade, it grew sharper, as though the car itself was a throat. Anna refused to stay the night alone. She begged me to come inside. I did, leaving the car parked outside under the orange street lamp. We sat on her couch, lights on, not speaking. I tried to laugh it off at one point, to say maybe it was a radio interference, some weird frequency bouncing around. But she just stared at me, eyes empty. She'd heard it too clearly for excuses. Then, around midnight, we both heard it again. The crying, not from outside, from inside her apartment. It came from the hallway, thin and brittle. Anna bolted upright. I grabbed a lamp for a weapon, my throat dry as sand. The sound moved closer, step by step, until it was just outside the living room door. "Don't open it," Anna breathed. But the crying stopped. Silence can be worse than sound. We stayed frozen for what felt like hours, waiting for it to return. It never did. When I finally dared to check, the hallway was empty. I didn't sleep that night, though Anna collapsed against me, shaking. By morning, the world looked normal again. Birds outside, buses rattling past. I thought maybe it had all been a shared hallucination, some strange after-effect of the festival. I tried to convince myself. But when I went back outside, the car was gone, vanished. No broken glass, no tracks, no sign of theft. Just the empty space where it had stood. We filed a report. The police laughed at the idea that a car could just disappear, suggested it had been stolen, promised to call if they found it. They never did. 2 weeks later, a farmer called the police after finding a burnt-out shell of a car in a field near the river, miles from where I'd left it. They said it matched my license plate. But when I went to identify it, the interior was completely melted. No seats, no panels, just ash and metal. The strangest part? The officer asked if I had children, because in the melted remains of the back seat, They'd found what looked like the outline of a small handprint seared into the leather before it burned away. I don't drink anymore. I don't go to festivals. I don't cross bridges if I can help it. Sometimes, though, when I wake in the middle of the night, I swear I still hear it. A small, fragile voice crying, muffled, like it's just beyond the wall. I tell myself it's nothing, but I never believe it. And Anna? She moved away the next year. Sent me one letter before she left, just a single sentence. It followed me once, in my new flat. I won't stay another night. We never spoke again. I'm telling you this because I need someone to believe me. To understand that it wasn't just some drunken trick of the night. It happened. Every detail, as I've told you. And if you ever hear a child crying when you're alone, when it makes no sense for a child to be there, don't stop. Don't open the door. Don't look for it, because once you hear it, it won't let you go. Story number 11. I was adjusting the radio dial in the back seat when the voice came through, clipped and frantic, breaking through static like someone drowning. Unit 4, requesting assistance, officer down. The others thought it was part of some late-night program, maybe an experimental art broadcast, but I knew the tone of panic was real. We were 5 of us crammed in that rental van, driving back from a long day of shooting interviews for our student documentary. The moment I heard the call, I froze. The others laughed it off, but the voice kept repeating coordinates in broken German, desperate, and I found myself scribbling them onto my notebook before I even realized what I was doing. Did you get that? I asked Lena, who was behind the wheel. She gave me a side glance, amused. You're not seriously thinking. But I interrupted. He's hurt. Listen to him. And as if on cue, the transmission cut into silence. The kind of silence that made the hairs on your arms rise, like the air itself had gone dead. We argued for a few minutes. Kai said it was probably some prank, or maybe a replay of old police communications. Jonas muttered something about not wanting to waste fuel chasing ghosts. But when the voice crackled back once more, weaker this time, repeating assistance, officer down, coordinates, Lena swore under her breath and steered the van off the highway toward the forest roads outside Leipzig. The road was narrow, twisting, barely lit. My stomach knotted as we bumped along, the van rattling over uneven asphalt. I kept reading the numbers I'd jotted down, comparing them to the map app on my phone. The closer we got, the more uneasy I felt. It wasn't the danger of helping someone, it was something subtler, like we were intruding into a place we had no right to be. The forest pressed in on both sides, tall trees like walls, their shapes flickering in the headlights. No houses, no signs, just road and blackness. Then, suddenly, Lena whispered, "There." Her headlights caught the glint of metal off to the side of the road. We slowed to a crawl. My heart hammered. At first, I thought it was just a wrecked car dumped and forgotten. But as we pulled closer, the unmistakable shape of a German police car came into view, overturned on its side, the front crumpled, windshield shattered. I smelled rust and oil before we even stopped. The doors were buckled, the siren lights smashed, but faint red paint still showed through the dust. Kai muttered, "This looks ancient." Jonas nodded. "Like it's been here for decades." I didn't want to admit it, but they were right. It wasn't just wrecked, it looked old, the way metal dulls and paint fades over years, not days. Still, I climbed out with Lena. The forest was deadly quiet. No crickets, no wind, nothing. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. We circled the car cautiously. The tires had rotted away, rubber peeling like burnt paper. And yet, there was a body slumped halfway out the driver's window. My chest tightened, breath caught in my throat. The man was in uniform, blue fabric discolored and torn, his face half buried against the glass. His skin looked too pale, too stiff. "Is he?" Lena asked, but I was already crouching. I forced myself to look closer. The badge on his chest was corroded but legible. Polizei. His ID wallet hung from his belt, and against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I pulled it free. My fingers trembled as I flipped it open. The plastic was cracked, the photo faded, but the date glared up at me. 1974. I dropped it like it had burned me. Kai swore loudly, backing away. "This is some sick setup," he spat. "We're not staying here." But the others kept staring, hypnotized, as though the car itself was whispering to them. Jonas leaned close to the shattered windshield, whispering, "How can a transmission come from him if he's been dead 40 years? "The radio in our van answered for us. It crackled suddenly, the same desperate plea blaring loud enough for all of us to hear. The officer's voice again, same words, same cadence, begging for help. We turned as one to look at the body. Its mouth was slightly open, teeth visible, lips shriveled, and for one unbearable second, I thought I saw its chest shift, as though drawing in air. I bolted. "We have to go, now." My voice broke in panic. Lena grabbed my arm, equally terrified but frozen. Jonas shook his head violently, mumbling, "This doesn't make sense." And then, the forest itself seemed to breathe. The air grew heavier, pressing against my skin. The overturned car groaned, metal popping, and the smell of rot deepened. I yanked Lena back toward the van, shouting at everyone to move. Kai finally obeyed, sprinting past me, but Jonas lingered, his eyes fixed on the corpse like it was calling him silently. "Jonas!" I screamed, and that broke the spell. He stumbled back, fumbling into the van behind us. We piled in, Lena slamming the door and fumbling with the ignition. The moment the headlights cut across the wreck again, my stomach turned. The body was gone, the driver's window empty. The ID I'd dropped was missing from the dirt. Lena cursed and slammed the accelerator. The van roared forward, wheels spinning in gravel, and we tore down the road like hell itself was behind us. No one spoke for several minutes. Only our ragged breathing and the engine's whine filled the silence. I kept twisting in my seat, convinced something would follow, but the road remained empty. Finally, Kai broke the quiet with a low, angry voice. "We're not talking about this. Ever. You hear me?" But the radio had other ideas. Without anyone touching it, the dial flicked back, static flaring, and then the voice returned. Not the same words this time, not a distress call, just a steady whisper, "Don't leave me here." It repeated, again and again, until Jonas screamed and smacked the radio with his fist. The sound cut off. We didn't stop driving until we reached Leipzig's city lights. Only then did we dare pull over, shaking, trying to convince ourselves we weren't insane. Jonas refused to let go of the idea that maybe it had been some elaborate radio installation, a trick broadcast. Lena stared at her hands, knuckles white, muttering that bodies don't just disappear. Kai wouldn't look at any of us, just smoked one cigarette after another. I still had dirt under my fingernails from where I'd touched that ID. I couldn't stop thinking about the date, 1974. Whoever that man had been, he'd called out across decades. And we had answered. That thought alone left me cold. For weeks afterward, none of us spoke about it. We finished our project, handed in our film, pretended life was normal, but little things kept happening. Jonas woke up one night to the sound of a radio in his apartment, though he didn't own one. Lena found coordinates scribbled in her notebook she swore she hadn't written. I dreamt of the man's face, lips parting, whispering for help that never came. The final blow came months later, when a package arrived at my dorm. No sender, no return address. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, was the officer's ID wallet. Same crack in the plastic, Same faded photo, same date, 1974. And this time, tucked inside, was a scrap of paper with fresh ink, my own name scrawled across it in handwriting I didn't recognize. I've carried that weight ever since. When people ask why I quit filmmaking, why I never went into journalism like I planned, I don't know how to explain. How do you tell someone that you followed a voice into the woods and brought something back with you? That every time I hear static on the radio, my chest tightens and I'm terrified it will start again, that same desperate plea echoing from a man who died before I was even born? You wouldn't believe me if I said this, but I'll tell you anyway. Because you asked. Last week, late at night, I was driving alone, trying to clear my head. I flipped the dial, half without thinking, and through the hiss came that same voice, weaker now, rasping but clear enough. Unit 4, Assistance. I turned the radio off immediately. But the coordinates were already in my head. I know where they lead. I'll never go back. But someone will. Someone always does. And when they do, I know they'll find him waiting, still calling, still begging, because once you hear him, once you answer, it never really stops. Story number 12. I gripped the steering wheel harder than I needed to, trying to calm the jitter in my hands. I'd been driving for hours across Denmark, making my way through the countryside outside Aarhus. The car wasn't mine. I'd borrowed it from a fellow backpacker I'd met at the hostel, a beat-up little hatchback that rattled every time I shifted gears. I wasn't supposed to be out there that late, but my restlessness had pushed me to keep going. I wanted the road, the solitude, the quiet. And then, just as suddenly as someone flicking a switch, nothing felt right anymore. It started with the sign. A green road marker with white letters came into view, but as I drove past, the letters looked backwards, as though I were reading them in a mirror. I slowed down, blinked hard, and looked again in the rearview mirror, and the letters were clear, readable. But straight ahead, they had been reversed. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was tired, maybe the Danish spelling just threw me off. But the next sign, the one that marked a curve ahead, was also reversed. I could read it perfectly in the rearview mirror, yet on the road itself, it was backwards. That was when I looked at my watch, a cheap digital one I'd picked up months earlier in Germany. The seconds were ticking down instead of up. I stared at it, feeling my chest tighten, my breath shortening. The numbers weren't rolling forward the way time should. They were unraveling, slipping backward. I tapped the screen, thinking it was malfunctioning, but then the minutes followed, and I realized it wasn't the watch. Something was wrong with me, or the road, or both. I pressed the brakes hard and pulled over onto the shoulder. The countryside was silent, no other cars, no wind in the trees, just me and the stillness pressing against my ears. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaky, and paced a few steps onto the asphalt. The air itself felt heavy, like the night was pressing down on me. My heart thudded so loud I could hear it in my skull. I needed to think. Maybe I had driven into some strange detour. Maybe there was an explanation. I turned to get back in the car, and that's when I saw it. The lines on the road weren't normal anymore. The white stripes that should have guided me forward were pointing inward, like arrows directing me the wrong way. They converged into the distance behind me, not ahead. My mouth went dry, my brain scrambling to explain something that didn't make sense. The road wanted me to go backward. I climbed back into the driver's seat, slamming the door a little harder than I meant to. My palms were damp, slick on the wheel. I told myself I'd just keep driving forward, ignore the signs, ignore my stupid watch. Forward was the only direction that mattered. But when I put the car in gear and rolled ahead, the engine stuttered violently. The wheel jerked against me, and the headlights flickered. The car coughed, shuddered, and then the engine cut out completely. Silence. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield. I turned the key again. Nothing. Again, nothing. But then, when I put it in reverse without thinking, the car roared to life instantly, smooth as if it had never stalled. I froze, gripping the shifter like it might bite me. My brain screamed not to do it, that driving backward at night on a narrow road was insane, but every part of the car seemed to hum with agreement. Reverse was the way forward. I sat there trembling, trying to summon the courage to ignore whatever was happening. But the signs in the mirror called to me. The lines on the road behind me glowed faintly, as if guiding me. I whispered out loud, like admitting it would make it less real. It wants me to go backward. I pressed the clutch, shifted into reverse, and eased off the brake. The car rolled smoothly, the headlights illuminating the road I had already traveled. My body protested with every fiber of instinct, but the car glided like it belonged in that direction. I kept glancing over my shoulder, then back at the mirror, then back again, the motion making my stomach churn. At first, nothing unusual happened beyond the wrongness of the situation, but then the rearview mirror began to show things I couldn't see when I turned around. A barn standing by the roadside, pale and leaning not there when I looked over my shoulder. A shape walking along the shoulder gone when I twisted in my seat to find it. My throat ached from swallowing down panic. The mirror showed the truth of the road, or some truth I didn't want. My thoughts tangled. If I stopped, what would happen? Would the car die again? Would the road vanish? My mind spun with possibilities I couldn't afford to test. So I kept reversing, gripping the wheel, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. The kilometers crawled by in a blur of backward motion. My watch ticked down minute by minute, like time itself was unwinding. Midnight became 11:59, 11:58. A sick thought clawed at me. What happens when it hits zero? Would I unravel with it? The tension broke when I saw movement in the mirror. A figure, no, a man standing in the middle of the road behind the car. He didn't move, didn't step aside, didn't signal. Just stood there, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly. My chest constricted. I stomped the brake, and the car jolted to a stop. When I whipped around to look out the rear window, the road was empty. Nothing. But in the mirror, he was still there, closer now, only a few meters away. God, no, I muttered, my voice cracking. My hands shook as I fumbled the shifter into neutral, but the car only sputtered, dead again, unless I slid it back into reverse. When I did, the man in the mirror tilted his head the other way, like acknowledging me. I almost vomited from the panic. I drove backward again, too fast, the car swerving as I tried to keep it straight. My shoulders cramped from constantly twisting to check both the mirror and the rear window. Every so often, the man appeared again in the mirror, closer, clearer, his eyes catching the headlights in a way that made them gleam silver. The seconds on my watch counted down ruthlessly. 11:30, 11:29. Each tick was a hammer in my skull. My mind was unraveling along with the time. I didn't know what would happen when I hit the beginning of something midnight. My own life, I didn't know. But the road offered no escape, only the backward path. Hours, or what felt like hours, stretched into an eternity of reversal. My body ached, my eyes stung, my throat was raw, from muttering prayers I hadn't spoken since childhood. And then, just when I thought I couldn't hold the wheel another second, the horizon began to brighten. Not headlights, not the glow of a town, but the faint wash of dawn pressing into the night. The road fought it. The mirror shivered with static, the white lines blurred, the man's shape flickered like bad film. My watch clung to 10 minutes before 11, desperate not to let go. But the light kept coming, steady and relentless. When the first ray of sun touched the road, The car lurched so hard I almost lost control. The mirror cracked from corner to corner with a sharp pop. The man dissolved into nothing. My watch went blank, the screen dark. The car sputtered, stalled, and then restarted on its own in first gear, as though begging me to finally drive forward. I slammed it into gear and sped down the road, not daring to look back. The signs were normal again, the lines aligned correctly, the world restored. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. But I didn't stop until I reached the outskirts of Aarhus, where other cars and people reminded me reality still existed. When I parked and stumbled out, the sun high enough to warm my face, I looked at my wrist. The watch was dead, black as stone. I peeled it off and threw it into a trash bin, my breath still uneven. I never told the guy I'd borrowed the car from what had happened. I never drove outside Aarhus again either. But even now, all these years later, when I glance in a rearview mirror at night, I still half expect to see the man standing there, silver eyes gleaming, waiting for me to drive backward again. Story number 13. I was leaning against the passenger door, half asleep, when I first noticed the line of cars moving slowly ahead of us. We were 4 of us crammed in the back of an old hatchback, driving back from a night at a friend's house in the countryside. Mark was at the wheel, music low, his face tense with concentration because the roads outside Galway can twist like they were designed to test your nerves. I nudged him and pointed through the windshield. "What's going on up there?" I asked, thinking maybe it was a tractor holding traffic or some festival thing. But it wasn't that. The cars ahead of us moved in deliberate unison, headlights glowing dull yellow, each crawling at the same exact speed, and between them, people walked. It took me a moment to understand. They weren't just walking, they were carrying a coffin. An empty wooden coffin, at least it looked empty, the way they held it with such unnatural ease, as though it weighed nothing at all. I felt my chest tighten. A funeral procession at night? On this road? None of it made sense. Mark muttered, "Weird time for a funeral." Nobody laughed, we all just stared. The line of mourners, maybe 20 people, all dressed in black, faces pale and stern, walked in rhythm. Every step was in perfect sync, no sound of conversation, no coughs, no shuffling. Just the creak of the coffin. "Go around them," Jason whispered. His voice cracked like a kid's. He was 17, like me, but in that moment he sounded younger. Mark slowed instead. Something about the way the procession filled the road made passing feel impossible. The cars behind us seemed frozen too, their drivers silent silhouettes. I remember the first wave of dread hitting me when one of the mourners turned his head. His face caught the glow of our headlights, expressionless, eyes flat, as if he wasn't even looking at us but through us. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. They stopped. The whole procession halted as one. The coffin lowered to the road in eerie unison. We all froze in the car, gripping door handles and seat belts like idiots waiting for a green light. Then, one mourner raised his arm and pointed directly at our car. Not at Mark, not at me, at the whole car, with a stiff, undeniable gesture. The others began walking toward us. Not fast, not threatening, just steady, inevitable steps. My skin prickled. Mark slammed the car into reverse, but the headlights caught something in the rearview mirror that made him slam the brakes. More people. Another group, standing perfectly still behind our car, blocking the road. "Jesus Christ," Lisa whispered beside me. She was trying not to cry, though her breathing gave her away. "What do they want?" The answer came when one mourner stepped closer, leaned toward the glass, and spoke. His lips hardly moved, but the words were perfectly clear. "One is missing." I swear the air went out of the car. None of us moved. The phrase repeated from another voice, then another. Soon, they were all chanting it softly, a hushed chorus pressing in on every side of us. One is missing, one is missing. Mark gripped the wheel like he might crush it. Don't open the doors, he hissed. His knuckles were white, but as if in answer, someone outside tried the rear handle where I Saturday. The click of the mechanism made my stomach lurch. I locked it again and shoved my weight against the door. The faces outside were blank, their chanting never breaking rhythm. Then the coffin lid swung open by itself. Empty, waiting. They lifted it again, this time angled toward us like an invitation. Or an order. Jason panicked first. He kicked his door open, bolted out into the ditch. "I'm not staying here," he yelled. The mourners didn't chase him. They didn't need to. They just turned their heads in perfect unity to watch him run. Their eyes followed him until he was swallowed by the trees. Then slowly, they turned. Back to us. One is missing. Mark swore under his breath, fumbling with the ignition. The engine coughed, then died. He tried again, harder, but it wouldn't catch. My whole body shook with the certainty that we weren't going anywhere. The mourners closed in tighter, hands brushing against the car, palms flat on the glass, leaving smears that looked like ash. Lisa broke. She started crying loudly, begging them, "Please, we don't know what you want, please just let us go." But they didn't even glance at her. Their eyes stayed on me. I don't know why. I still don't know why. My heart pounded so violently I thought they'd hear it. The tallest of them leaned close, his face inches from mine through the glass. His breath fogged the window. "Inside," he said softly. Not shouted, not cruel, just final. Something inside me cracked then. Not courage, something else. A cold, resigned clarity. If I didn't move, they'd open the car themselves. If I resisted, they'd drag me. Every instinct screamed to run like Jason, but my body unlocked the door instead. Mark grabbed my wrist. "Don't." His eyes were wild, desperate. But I shook him off and stepped out. The night was so silent I could hear my own pulse in my ears. The mourners parted for me, forming a path to the coffin. My feet moved like I wasn't controlling them. The coffin loomed larger the closer I got. I peered inside, expecting nothing, but what I saw froze my lungs. It wasn't empty anymore. My own body lay inside, eyes closed, hands folded neatly across my chest. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. "That's not real," I whispered to myself. "That's not me." But the faces around me offered no comfort. They just stood waiting, chanting low and steady. "One is missing. One is missing." I turned to run, but two pairs of hands seized my arms. Cold, dry, unshakable. They didn't hurt me, but I couldn't break free. They guided me forward. My voice cracked as I shouted for Mark, for Lisa, but they didn't come. I don't know if they couldn't or if they chose not to. When they pushed me over the coffin, I kicked and screamed, thrashing, desperate not to see that still face beneath me. But as my head tilted down, the figure inside opened its eyes. My eyes? It smiled. I blacked out. When I woke, it was morning. I was lying in the grass by the roadside, alone. The cars, the mourners, the coffin all gone. Birds sang like nothing had happened. My friend's car was parked a few meters away, doors wide open, engine cold. Lisa was gone. Mark was gone. Jason was gone. Only I remained. I stumbled into town hours later, trembling, filthy, half mad. I told the Garda what I'd seen. They searched. They found nothing. Not Jason, not Mark, not Lisa. To this day, their families don't know what happened. Sometimes they look at me like I killed them. Sometimes I wonder if they're right, because every summer night since, I've seen them again. A line of cars on some empty road, mourners carrying a coffin, And when I catch a glimpse of the face inside, it isn't me anymore. It's one of them. And I know, with a certainty that gnaws my bones, that they're still out there, still marching, still searching. Because one is always missing. And next time, it might be you. Story number 14. I was halfway down the motorway, thinking about how much I hated networking dinners, when my tires suddenly made a sound I'd never heard before. It wasn't the usual hum of rubber against asphalt, but a sharp squeak, like glass being wiped clean. I glanced down, and for a split second, I thought the road had turned into a sheet of water reflecting my headlights. But it wasn't water, it was smooth, slick, and gleaming like a mirror stretching endlessly under me. My first instinct was that I was overtired, still buzzed from the wine at dinner, and that my eyes were playing tricks. I tightened my grip on the wheel and muttered to myself, "Focus, Martin, just get to the hotel." But the reflection didn't go away. It grew sharper. At first, it was almost mesmerizing, like I was driving on a lake of light. But then the reflection started showing more than just the underside of my car and the glow of my headlights. Shapes appeared. At the far edges of the mirror-like surface, faint outlines of cars began gliding alongside me, as if in another lane beneath the glass. I leaned forward, my chest pressing against the steering wheel, trying to see if they were real cars on the road beside me, but no, there was nothing there. Above ground, I was alone. Below, in the mirror road, vehicles kept appearing, headlights shimmering like stars caught under ice. I slowed slightly, my heart racing, and one of those mirrored cars pulled up alongside my reflection. It was the same model as mine. My skin prickled. My reflection inside that mirrored car wasn't matching my movements. While I stared, the man in that car turned his head toward me. It was me, but younger, maybe mid-20s. My hair was fuller, darker, my jaw unlined. He was smiling, carefree, exactly how I'd looked back then. I whispered out loud, "What the hell is this?" My younger self kept smiling, lifted his hand, and gave me a wave. My throat tightened, and I nearly swerved before, snapping my eyes back to the road ahead. I wanted to believe I was hallucinating, but I hadn't taken anything stronger than a glass of wine. My palms were clammy, and I could hear my own shallow breaths echoing inside the car. I muttered to myself, trying to anchor my thoughts. "You're tired, that's all. Basel, conference, hotel, sleep, that's the plan." But then another car slid into view, behind the first. This time, the reflection showed me in my 40s, just a bit older than I was now. Slightly heavier, graying temples, the familiar slump in posture from long years of desk work. He wasn't smiling. He was shaking his head slowly, like he pitied me. I shouted without meaning to, "Stop it!" My voice cracked. The sound of my shout made me realize how silent the world outside had become. No hum of engines from distant traffic, no faint rush of air over the side mirrors, nothing but the steady pulse of my own heart. I wanted to pull over, but the road had no shoulder, no exits. Just the endless glass, stretching into blackness. I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing my gaze forward, refusing to glance down again. But curiosity gnawed at me. After maybe a minute or an hour, time had lost all logic. I dared to flick my eyes sideways. A third car had appeared. Inside was me, much older, maybe 70. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, and he looked like he hadn't slept in years. He pressed his palms against the glass of his window, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I rolled down my own window, leaning close to the rush of dead air, straining to listen. His lips formed the same phrase again and again. "Don't stop, don't stop." My skin crawled. The urge to hit the brakes, to flee whatever this was almost unbearable. But that warning, the desperation in his wrinkled face, kept my foot steady. I whispered, "Okay, I won't stop. as if to reassure him, or maybe myself. My voice shook. Then, without warning, a blinding set of headlights erupted behind me in the reflection. My rearview mirror showed nothing in the real world. But down in that glassy surface, a monstrous truck was bearing down on me, its grille stretching wide like a gaping mouth, headlights burning with an unnatural red hue. The roar of an engine finally broke the silence. But it wasn't around me, it was underneath, vibrating through the glass. I pressed harder on the accelerator, my car trembling, speed climbing. As I surged forward, more versions of myself filled the lanes below, dozens of them now. Some were children, riding in the back seat, looking out the window with innocent eyes. Some were teenagers with acne, awkwardly slouched. Others were middle-aged, stern, angry, broken. They lined the road in both directions, watching me, mirroring me. Some waved, some shouted soundless warnings, and just one pressed his forehead against the glass, blood streaming from his mouth in a grotesque grin. I nearly vomited when I realized he was the one who looked most like me right now. I screamed into the empty night, "What do you want from me?" My voice cracked so badly it hurt my throat. My answer came from the road itself. The reflections began mouthing in unison, their faces distorting, lips twisting, all shapes of me whispering the same phrase. You know, you know, you know. The words slashed through me because they were right. I did know. Deep down, beneath years of burying it, I knew. I knew what I had done 15 years ago. I had been drunk. I had been reckless. I had driven home from a client dinner on a night not so different from this one. I'd hit something, a cyclist, a boy maybe. I never stopped to check. Just a sickening thud, a dent on the hood, and then nothing. I'd driven on, terrified, convincing myself it must have been an animal, not a person, and I'd never told a soul. Now all those versions of me, the innocent ones, the guilty ones, the aged and the angry, stared back at me as if to strip me bare. The truck's roar grew louder, bearing down on my reflection, as though to swallow me whole. I slammed the accelerator to the floor, my chest burning with fear, tears streaming from my eyes. The speedometer climbed, but the mirrored road below seemed endless, mocking my desperation. Then the younger version of me, the first one, the smiling, carefree man, drove up alongside again. This time, his expression was dark. He pointed ahead. My stomach dropped. In the distance, where the glass road curved, I saw an exit ramp appear. It hadn't been there before. Above ground, I saw only empty night. Below, the ramp glowed faintly, beckoning. I didn't think, I just steered. My car veered, tires shrieking against the impossible surface. For a moment, it felt like I'd left the ground, floating, falling, tumbling, but then the jolt of asphalt returned. The sound of rubber against real road filled my ears. I gasped, like a drowning man breaking the surface of water. Behind me, the mirror road was gone. Just black night and the faint red glow of taillights from a car miles ahead. I pulled over the moment I saw a proper shoulder, slamming the gear into park, and stumbled out of the car. My legs barely held me. I crouched by the roadside, sobbing uncontrollably, heaving until my throat burned. I thought of the boy on that long-ago road, the one I pretended hadn't existed. The glass highway hadn't shown me nightmares. It had shown me myself, all the selves I'd been, and the one who knew the truth. After nearly half an hour, I managed to steady my breathing. I drove the rest of the way to the hotel, but every reflective surface terrified me. Storefront windows, puddles, even the gleam of the lobby floor. I avoided them all, staring only at the ground or straight ahead. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled up the news archives on my laptop, my hands shaking as I searched for accidents 15 years ago, near Zurich, on that road I used to take home. I found it. Headline: Teen cyclist dies in hit and run. My breath caught when I saw the date. The night matched. The place matched. I stared at the screen for hours, my chest hollow, until dawn seeped through the curtains. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called the police. My voice trembled, but I told them everything. The drinking, the road, the impact, the lies. I told them I believed I was the one who had killed that boy. There was silence on the other end. Then the officer asked me to come in. I did. For the first time in years, I felt something like relief. I don't know if what I drove on that night was real, some supernatural punishment, some twisted mirror of guilt, or just my conscience tearing free. But I know this. I saw myself for what I am, in every age, in every form. I saw the truth I'd buried, and now, when I close my eyes, I don't see the boy's bloodied bicycle anymore. I see the glass highway, stretching forever, lined with all the men I've been. Some wave, some mourn, and always one smiles at me with bloody teeth, reminding me that I can never outdrive myself. Story number 15. I was half asleep in the back seat when Tobias shouted that he saw lights in the valley below. I lifted my head, annoyed, and squinted through the car window. Sure enough, there was a faint glow flickering against the dark outline of the mountains. At first I thought it was just a cluster of farmhouses, but then the glow shifted, pulsing in different colors, and I caught the faint sweep of what looked like a Ferris wheel spinning. A carnival, out here, in the middle of nowhere. I felt the same mix of curiosity and unease that the others did. It was almost midnight, and we were on a lonely Austrian road outside Innsbruck. We'd been driving aimlessly for hours, chasing nothing but boredom. Seeing those lights felt like stumbling onto something meant for us alone. "Let's go check it out," Tobias insisted, from the front seat. Anja was driving, and she hesitated, but not much. We were four friends on a summer road trip, restless, high on freedom, and the idea of a secret carnival tucked away in a valley was too tempting to ignore. No one questioned why it would be open at midnight. We didn't even talk about it. We just turned down the narrow gravel road, bouncing along until the valley opened wide and the carnival came into view. It was small, maybe half a dozen rides, and yet it was alive. The Ferris wheel turned steadily, painted lights flashing red and blue, reflecting off the nearby trees. A carousel spun in lazy circles, and I swore I could hear faint carnival music floating in the air. But there were no cars parked outside, no ticket booths, no people running the rides. It looked like it was built just for us. We parked close without even discussing it, stepped out, and just stared for a moment. It was beautiful in a strange, off-kilter way, as though someone had built an entire carnival but stripped it of everything except the machines and the glow. I remember the way my skin prickled as I walked toward the Ferris wheel. Tobias was already bounding ahead, laughing like a kid, while Anja locked the car behind us. Lucas, always the skeptic, muttered that this was probably private land and we'd get into trouble. But his voice sounded hollow. I knew he was unsettled. Still, he followed, because none of us wanted to be the one left out. The Ferris wheel was massive up close, larger than it had looked from the road, and it spun at a steady, mechanical pace. The seats creaked slightly with each turn. Tobias shouted up at it as if someone were listening. Nothing answered. We stood there for a minute, the four of us, waiting for some sign of who was running this thing. No one came. And then, as if the ride were offering itself, the wheels slowed and stopped, aligning 3 seats perfectly with the platform. "This is insane," Anja whispered. She had her arms folded across her chest, but she didn't stop Tobias when he hopped into one of the seats. He grinned at me, eyes wide with the thrill of it. "Come on," he said. "What's the worst that could happen?" I should have said no. I should have walked away. But my legs carried me forward before my brain could argue, and I slid into the seat next to him. Lucas followed reluctantly, muttering about how stupid we were being. Anja stayed on the ground, shaking her head but smiling nervously, as if she didn't want us to think she was scared. Then, without any of us touching a thing, the wheel jerked and began to move. At first it was exhilarating, the rush of air as we rose higher, the valley spread out below us, the colors of the lights spinning into streaks. I leaned back, laughing, but the sound died in my throat when I looked across the wheel. In the seat opposite us, at the very top, I saw two figures. They were us. Not just similar-looking strangers, but us. Unmistakably. Their clothes were identical, their faces lit by the same shifting lights, and they were staring down at us with twisted expressions of horror, mouths open in silent screams. I froze, my stomach lurching as though the seat had dropped out beneath me. Tobias followed my gaze, and I heard him choke on his breath. "Do you see that?" he whispered, clutching my arm so tightly it hurt. I nodded because I couldn't speak. Lucas twisted in his seat, eyes wide, and then he shouted for Anja, who was standing frozen on the ground below. She looked up, confused, until her eyes locked on the top of the wheel. I saw her face drain of color even in the shifting light. The ride kept turning, steady and relentless, and soon those versions of us rotated downward. As they passed, I saw their mouths moving, forming words I couldn't hear, their faces distorted with terror. Then they were below, and the wheel kept turning, bringing them up again, and again, like some cruel loop. Each time, their screams grew more desperate, though no sound reached us. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would split my chest. I wanted to get off, but the bar across our laps was locked tight. I tried to lift it, but it wouldn't budge. Tobias was swearing under his breath, pulling at his, and Lucas had started to kick the seat in front of him like a trapped animal. The wheel didn't slow. It just carried us higher again, bringing us face to face once more with those screaming doubles. This time, I thought I recognized the words. "Get out!" That's what it looked like. Their mouths shaped it over and over. Get out. The ride stopped suddenly with us at the very top. My stomach lurched, and I gripped the cold metal bar until my knuckles turned white. Directly across from us, perfectly aligned, were the doubles again. But they weren't screaming now, they were whispering. Faces inches from ours, though separated by empty air. Their eyes were wild, bloodshot, and full of something I can't describe. They mouthed the words slowly, deliberately. "You don't leave." The wheel jolted violently, and everything blurred. My stomach twisted, and I felt like the air was being sucked out of my lungs. When the wheel slowed again, the doubles were gone. Empty seats swung gently in their place. I looked down, frantic, searching for Anja, but she wasn't on the ground anymore. I called her name, shouting until my throat burned, but there was no answer. The wheel finally slowed to a stop at the bottom. The bars released with a sharp click. We stumbled out, legs shaking, and stood there in silence, the three of us gasping like we'd run a marathon. Anja was nowhere in sight. The car was still there, doors closed, headlights off. I shouted again, running toward it, yanking the doors open, but the car was empty. Her bag was still on the seat. Her jacket, too. It was as if she had vanished in the time it took for the wheel to turn. Lucas grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now." His voice was a rasp. Tobias just stood there, staring up at the Ferris wheel, his face slack with shock. I tried to pull him, but he shook his head slowly. "She's still on it," he whispered. "Look, I didn't want to. I swear I didn't." But I lifted my eyes, and at the very top of the wheel, in one of the swinging seats, sat Anja. Her face was pale, her hands gripping the bar so tightly her fingers looked broken. She was screaming silently, just like the doubles had, her mouth stretched impossibly wide. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. Lucas cursed and grabbed my arm again, pulling me toward the car, but Tobias wouldn't move. He kept staring up, whispering her name like a prayer. Then, before I could stop him, he ran back to the wheel and climbed into the nearest seat. The machine shuddered to life instantly. Lucas shouted, lunging as if to grab him, but it was too late. The wheel carried Tobias upward, higher and higher, until he was at the top, directly across from Anja. Only, it wasn't Anja anymore. Not really. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth twisting into a grotesque smile, and as the wheel turned, Tobias began to scream, just like she had. Silent, endless, his face distorted by terror. The wheel kept spinning, relentless, dragging him through the cycle again and again. Lucas pulled me into the car. He was shaking so hard he could barely get the key into the ignition. I couldn't stop staring through the windshield at the Ferris wheel, still turning, still flashing its colored lights against the dark valley. Two figures now screamed from the seats above, caught in some endless loop. My throat was raw, my body numb, but I knew we couldn't stay. Lucas slammed the car into gear, and we tore down the gravel road, the lights shrinking behind us until they were gone. We didn't speak for hours. Not until we reached the highway, and the normal glow of Innsbruck appeared on the horizon. Then Lucas finally whispered, "We don't tell anyone, ever." His voice was cracked, his hands trembling on the wheel. I wanted to argue, to scream that we had to go back, to call someone, to do something. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. My chest felt hollow, my mind refusing to process what had just happened. The truth was, I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want to admit it was real. That was 35 years ago. I've never gone back to that valley, never looked for it, never even told anyone the full story until now. Lucas refused to speak of it again. He moved away not long after, and we lost touch. Sometimes I wonder if he remembers, if it haunts him the way it haunts me. Because I still see it when I close my eyes. The Ferris wheel turning, the silent screams, the look on Tobias's face when he realized he wasn't coming back down. I hear it in my dreams, the whispering voices telling me we don't leave. And every summer, when the nights stretch long and the air feels heavy, I can almost see those lights flickering in the distance again, waiting for me to come back. But I won't. I can't. Because I know if I ever set foot near that valley again, the wheel will still be turning, and this time, the empty seat will be waiting for me. Story number 16. I pressed harder on the steering wheel as if holding it tighter would make the road clearer. It was supposed to be a simple drive back to our hotel in Porto after dinner, but the road had disappeared into a wall of fog so thick it looked like someone had pulled a white sheet over the world. My wife, Anna, leaned forward in her seat, squinting. "This isn't normal," she whispered. Her voice was shaky, the way it gets when she's trying not to sound afraid. I wanted to reassure her, but I couldn't even see the lines on the road anymore. The headlights were useless, reflecting back into my eyes like mirrors. I slowed to a crawl, the tires crunching against gravel that told me I had drifted off the pavement. I eased it back toward where I thought the asphalt should be, but everything looked the same, white, endless, suffocating. I muttered, "We'll just wait it out," and pulled the car over. I kept the engine running, hoping the low hum would anchor me to something real. Anna hugged her arms tight across her chest, staring into the fog like she expected someone to walk out of it. That's when I heard it, my name. Faint, stretched thin, like someone calling from a long distance, Miguel. I looked at Anna immediately, thinking she'd said it, but her lips were pressed together. She met my stare and shook her head. Then we both heard it again, only louder. This time it was her name, Anna. She whispered, "No, no, no." She locked the doors, her hand trembling so badly she hit the button twice. I turned off the radio, just to be sure, but the voice hadn't come from the speakers. It was outside, in the fog. The air inside the car felt heavier, pressing against my chest, and I realized I was holding my breath. I cracked the window down an inch, enough for cool air to slip in. The fog had a smell, damp and earthy, like wet leaves rotting in a cellar. The voices came again, now overlapping, dozens of them, all whispering our names in. Different tones, different languages, some calm, some frantic. It felt like the air itself was alive with them, brushing against my ears, slipping beneath my skin. Anna grabbed my arm. "Please drive, just drive, anywhere." I wanted to, but there was nowhere to go. I couldn't even see the hood of the car. Still, her panic was contagious, so I eased forward, the tires crunching softly, the headlights cutting only a foot ahead. The voices didn't fade. They followed, circling us, closer, like the fog itself carried them. I kept my eyes locked on the faint shadow of the road ahead, but my ears kept twisting toward the voices. They started saying more than our names, half-formed sentences, unfinished warnings. "Don't stop, stay with us, he's here." Then laughter, high-pitched and cruel, overlapping with sobs and moans. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. Anna started to cry. Not loud, but broken little sobs she was trying to hide. I reached for her hand, but before I touched her, she screamed. I slammed the brakes, my chest slamming into the seatbelt. What did you see?" I shouted. She pointed at the windshield. Through the fog, I could just barely make out shapes, rows of thin, dark verticals. At first I thought trees, but then I realized they were posts. No, not posts, crosses. Dozens of them, arranged unevenly, like a cemetery scattered across the roadside. I blinked hard, tried to shake the fog from my brain, but when I opened my eyes, the shapes were clearer. We weren't on a road anymore. The gravel had turned to dirt beneath the tires. And around us, through the fog, I could see carved stones, tilted and cracked, some swallowed by vines, gravestones. I don't remember turning, I don't remember leaving the road. But we were in a graveyard, a vineyard graveyard. Rows of vines, skeletal and twisted, stretched out between the graves, their leaves shriveled like old paper. Anna was whispering, "No, we can't be here, we can't be here." I tried to throw the car in reverse, but the tires spun, digging into soft ground. The fog was so thick, it was like we had driven underwater. The voices rose again, furious now, all shouting at once, names and curses, prayers and screams. I could feel them pressing against the glass, as if the car were a bubble keeping them out. Then, as sudden as a dropped curtain, silence. The voices cut off. My ears rang with the absence of them. I looked at Anna, and she was frozen, staring past me out her window. I turned and saw a figure standing between two gravestones, maybe 10 feet away. A man, tall, wearing what looked like a farmer's coat, head tilted unnaturally to one side. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of his shoulders and arms. He raised one hand, palm outward, like a signal for us to stop. My instinct was to honk the horn, to scare him off, but before I could, more figures appeared. First one, then 3, then a dozen, stepping out from between the graves, from behind the vines, surrounding the car. All of them, still, silent, staring. Their heads moved in jerky little tilts, like birds. The fog made their faces blurry, but I swear I saw mouths moving in silence. Anna was hyperventilating. I told her not to look, not to open her eyes. But she grabbed my shirt and hissed, "They're calling us." Her lips trembled, and I realized she wasn't talking about the voices outside, she was talking about something inside her head. I tried the ignition again, flooring the gas, but the car wouldn't move. It was like the earth itself held it down. My chest was tightening, not just from panic but from the air. It felt thick, heavy, as if breathing smoke. My vision swam. Then one of the figures moved closer. Slowly, deliberately, until it was at the hood of the car. I could see it clearer now. The coat was torn, hanging in strips, and beneath it the chest looked caved in, as if crushed. Its face was wrong too long, jaw hanging, slack, eyes too wide. And yet, when it opened its mouth, the voice that came out was my father's. "Miguel, get out, you don't belong in there, come home." My father had been dead for 15 years, I shouted. "No, you're not him." My voice cracked, but the figure just tilted its head, like I'd disappointed it. Behind it, the others began to whisper again, louder, in unison, Anna's name and mine, over and over like a chant. My skin crawled with it. Anna suddenly reached for the door handle. I grabbed her wrist, yelling, "Don't! Stay in the car!" She fought me, stronger than I thought she could be, eyes wild, saying, "They're waiting for us. They know us." She almost got the door open before I slammed the child lock. She collapsed into sobs, clawing at her own arms. Something inside me snapped. I threw the car into drive, pressed the pedal to the floor. The tires screamed, mud and dirt spraying, and for a second the car lurched forward. The figures didn't move, didn't flinch, as the bumper cut through them. Except it didn't. We passed right through them. Like mist, like they weren't there at all. The fog ripped apart around us, tearing like cloth. Suddenly the road was beneath us again, asphalt solid under the tires, headlights stretching down an empty, straight lane. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel, but I didn't stop. I didn't even breathe until the lights of Porto glowed faintly in the distance. When we finally reached the hotel, Anna didn't speak. She walked straight to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the bed, staring at my hands, still feeling the weight of that silence when the voices stopped. When she came out, her arms were covered in scratches, deep enough to bleed. She swore she didn't remember doing it. We left Portugal the next morning. We never spoke of it to anyone else, not even our families. But sometimes, in the quiet before sleep, Anna will whisper, "Do you hear them?" And I'll lie, tell her no. But the truth is, I still hear my name in the dark sometimes, stretched thin, like a call from far away. And the worst part isn't that the voices followed us. It's that sometimes, when I hear them, it isn't my name they're calling anymore. It's hers. Story number 17. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I realized, knuckles stiff, when my sister, Maeve, unfolded the crumpled road map for the 5th time that night. "It's not making sense," she muttered, dragging her finger across the lines, her nails catching on the crease. I hated how calm she sounded, even though we'd been driving in circles for over an hour. The road signs we passed felt wrong, old-fashioned somehow, like they belonged to another decade. One had rust eating through the metal, the lettering half gone. She traced a route with confidence anyway, insisting there was a shortcut to Limerick if we left the main road. I wanted to argue but didn't. We'd been bickering all evening, and I was exhausted from her need to always be right. The turnoff came like a suggestion more than a decision. A narrow lane, half hidden by overgrown hedges, opened to the right. Maeve tapped the map. "That's it, trust me." So I trusted her. Even as the car rattled over gravel that shouldn't have been there. It felt like the wheels sank too deep with every turn. The air shifted too, thick, like we'd driven into a pocket cut off from the rest of the world. I remember glancing into the rearview mirror and noticing how black the road behind us looked, as if the lane had been swallowed up the moment we entered. After a few minutes, the hedges gave way to open ground. The car's headlights landed on stone cottages, crooked and leaning against each other like tired men. A small cluster of them, no more than a dozen, built around what looked like a central square. I slowed, confused. The map Maeve held showed nothing here. "Well," she said, "I guess the shortcut worked." But her voice wavered. She'd never admit it, but I caught the quiver in her tone. The village looked alive. Lamps burned in some of the cottage windows, though the flames flickered too fast, like candlelight trembling against wind. I cut the engine, and we sat in silence for a doughty moment. Then I noticed it, the sound, water dripping everywhere. It was so constant it blended into the air, like the whole place breathed through damp walls. Maeve got out first. "Hello?" she called, half laughing. Her shoes squelched as if she'd stepped into mud, though the ground looked dry beneath the weak light. I hesitated, then followed, and the damp smell struck me immediately, like wet wool left too long in a cellar. Figures emerged, slow and deliberate, from the cottages. Men, women, even children. None carried lanterns, but I could see them well enough. Their clothes clung to their bodies as though they'd just waded from a river. Water streamed from their sleeves, ran down their necks, and pooled at their feet, every one of them dripping, and none of them shivering. The sound of the drops on stone echoed in my ears until it was unbearable. "Evening," Maeve said, her voice bright with false politeness. The villagers didn't answer. They only looked at us, their eyes fixed but empty, like they'd forgotten how to blink. My stomach twisted. I grabbed Maeve's arm, whispering that we should leave, but she shook me off. "They're probably just curious," she said. "It's a small place. Outsiders probably don't come often." A woman stepped forward, older, with long gray hair that stuck to her cheeks in wet strands. She raised her hand slowly and pointed toward one of the cottages. It was the only gesture anyone made. Maeve took a step, then another, like she was under some unspoken obligation. I didn't want to follow, but the thought of staying alone in that square with the rest of them felt worse. Inside the cottage, the smell of stagnant water hit harder. The floor glistened, as if soaked from beneath, yet when I touched it, it felt dry. A fire burned weakly in the hearth, the flames small and reluctant. Maeve sat at the table without hesitation. I stayed near the door, my whole body tense. The gray-haired woman placed a bowl in front of Maeve. It was filled with water so dark it seemed black. Ripples spread across the surface, though nothing had touched it. Maeve looked at me, a faint smirk tugging at her mouth as if to say I was overreacting. Then she lifted the bowl and drank. I swear to you, I saw the water cling to her lips, not fall back but seep into her skin. She set the bowl down slowly, her eyes wide. "It's cold," she whispered. Her voice sounded distant, hollow, like it came from underwater. I lunged toward her, trying to pull her away, but the old woman blocked me with surprising strength. Her wet hand on my chest felt like ice that burned. I dragged Maeve out eventually, stumbling into the square. The villagers hadn't moved. They stood exactly where they had before, dripping and staring. Maeve's skin had taken on a strange pallor, her cheeks damp, though she hadn't been crying. She muttered something under her breath, words I couldn't catch. I half-carried her back to the car, shoving her into the passenger seat and slamming the door. When I turned the key, the engine fought me, coughing and whining as though choked. The villagers began walking toward us, slow, deliberate, their feet splashing in puddles that hadn't been there a moment before. The engine caught at last, and I pressed the pedal down hard. The car lurched forward, tires skidding on the wet ground, though it hadn't rained. I didn't look back, not once, just kept driving until the cottages were gone and the lane stretched ahead again. Maeve sat silent, her head tilted against the window, her breath fogging the glass. By morning, when the first light touched the horizon, we found ourselves on a main road again. I pulled over to catch my breath, every muscle in my body trembling. Maeve stirred, blinking slowly, and for a moment I thought she'd laugh it all off. Instead, she looked at me with eyes that weren't hers anymore. They shimmered, dark and wet, like that bowl of water. We reached Limerick hours later. I demanded a map from a petrol station, one not creased and ruined like the one we had. When I spread it across the hood of the car, there was nothing where we'd been. No village, no cottages, only a reservoir. "You must be mistaken," the attendant told me when I pressed him, desperate. "That area's been underwater since the 50s. Whole community was relocated. No one lives there." Maeve leaned against the car, silent, her hair damp, though the day was dry and bright. Drops of water slid down her neck, soaking into her shirt. She didn't wipe them away. When I asked if she remembered the old woman, the bowl, any of it, she only looked at me with that hollow gaze and whispered, "It's colder here." I wanted to take her to a doctor, anyone, but she refused. Days passed, then weeks. She stopped eating food altogether, only drank water, gallons of it, like her body needed more than it could hold. I watched her slip away from me, not dying exactly, but becoming something else. At night I heard her moving through the house, her bare feet leaving wet prints across the floorboards. One morning, I woke to silence. Her room was empty, her bed soaked through. The back door stood open, a thin trail of water leading outside. I followed it down to the riverbank, calling her name until my voice broke, but she was gone. Only the sound of dripping remained, echoing around me, steady and merciless. I told myself I'd imagined it all, that grief had twisted reality. But last summer, on another road not far from Limerick, I saw cottages again. Just for a moment, in the corner of my headlights, stone walls leaning together, a square with figures standing still in the dark, and among them, a woman with long gray hair, dripping as always. Beside her, Maeve. She didn't wave, didn't call my name. She only looked at me, her eyes shimmering like black water, before the road bent and they disappeared. I haven't driven at night since. I don't trust roads that don't appear on maps, shortcuts that promise to save time, because I know what waits at the end of them. A village that drowned but refuses to stay dead. A community that drinks strangers into its fold. And a sister who belonged to me once, but now belongs to the water. Story number 18. I had just pulled off the narrow 2-lane road outside Dijon when I noticed it. A mask, pale and smooth, dangling from the lowest branch of a crooked tree at the edge of the gravel shoulder. It swayed slightly, even though there was no breeze, the way something might if it had been placed carefully and purposefully, not dropped. At first, I thought it was a discarded carnival mask, maybe left behind by a drunk teenager. But the way it hung there, facing the road, staring at me with hollow eye holes, it felt wrong. I should have ignored it, driven on, but curiosity has always been my weakness. I put the car in park and stepped out. Gravel crunched under my shoes, and my chest tightened, as if my body already knew what my mind hadn't yet admitted. I was making a mistake. I reached up and touched it. The mask was heavier than it looked, made of some kind of porcelain or thick plaster, cold against my skin. The face it showed was blank, neither male nor female, but with an exaggerated softness that unsettled me, lips too smooth, cheeks too round. I hesitated, told myself to leave it, but something inside me whispered that if I left it there, I'd never stop wondering. So I unclipped the thin wire loop from the branch and carried it back to my car, laying it carefully on the passenger seat. The moment I sat back behind the wheel, I felt ridiculous, like I'd just stolen some theater prop. I laughed at myself, shook my head, and started driving again. About 10 minutes later, I noticed the first car coming toward me. A small hatchback, headlights bouncing slightly as it rolled over the uneven road. As it passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver. My heart skipped, then hammered. The man behind the wheel wore a mask. Not just any mask, the same one I had on the seat next to me. White, blank, hollow-eyed. He turned his head slightly as we passed, and even though he couldn't possibly see me through my windshield, I felt the weight of his gaze. My throat went dry, and I muttered, "What the hell?" out loud, as if saying it would make the moment less insane. I told myself it was a coincidence. Some local festival, maybe, some late-night masquerade I didn't know about. That thought didn't hold long. The next car appeared 5 minutes later. Another driver, another identical mask, and this time the passenger wore one too. Both heads turned toward me as they passed, the porcelain faces illuminated for an instant by my headlights. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. My chest felt like a drum, each beat too loud, too hard. By the time the third masked driver passed, I was shaking. My rational mind scrambled for explanations, but none fit. There wasn't a carnival in Dijon that summer, no costume parade on a rural road at midnight. And the odds that 3 different cars, random travelers like me, would all be wearing the exact same mask I had picked up? Impossible. My eyes flicked to the passenger seat. The mask I'd taken still lay there, pale and waiting, like it knew something I didn't. I wanted to throw it out the window. Every instinct screamed at me to get rid of it. But another part of me, the stubborn, curious part, hesitated. What if throwing it away made things worse? What if the drivers weren't wearing masks at all, but the mask itself was showing me something, forcing me to see it everywhere? I couldn't decide which possibility was worse. I gritted my teeth, muttered, "Just get back to the city," and pressed harder on the gas. The road wound through empty farmland, no houses, no streetlights. Each time another car appeared, my stomach lurched. Every single one of them wore the mask. Some cars had whole families inside, every member with that blank porcelain face turned toward me, eyes invisible behind the hollows. At one point, a van full of children passed. Their small masked faces pressed against the windows, tilted, staring as if cataloging me. I nearly swerved off the road. I spoke out loud, to myself, because silence was unbearable. "They're not real. They can't be real. Just get to Dijon. Just get back." My voice shook, thin and unconvincing, but hearing it filled the car with something other than the pounding of my heart. I turned the radio on, static crackling. No stations came through, only a faint distorted sound, like voices underwater. I switched it off immediately. The silence after was worse. My phone had no signal. Of course it didn't. The bars had disappeared 10 minutes back, and I kept glancing at it as though that would change anything. I considered pulling over, but what then? Wait for the next masked car to stop behind me? The thought made my skin crawl. Better to keep moving, always moving. At one point, I noticed headlights behind me. They grew larger, closer, too close. A sedan tailing me, uncomfortably tight on the empty road. I could see the driver's face in the glow of his dashboard. The mask, always the mask. His head tilted slightly, and I felt him staring at me through the rearview mirror. I pressed the accelerator, but he matched my speed. Faster. He kept pace. My breath came in gasps, shallow and fast. Finally, I swerved onto a narrow side road without thinking. The sedan didn't follow. Relief hit me like water, but it didn't last. I realized I had no idea where I was anymore. The side road was even darker, lined with trees that arched overhead. For several minutes, no cars appeared. I began to hope that maybe I'd escaped whatever this was. Then I saw movement up ahead. A car parked on the shoulder, doors open, figures standing beside it. I slowed instinctively. They all turned toward me at once. 6 of them, adults and children, each one wearing the mask. They didn't move, just watched as I crept past. My skin prickled with cold sweat. One of them, a small girl, raised her hand slowly and pointed at my car. At me. My foot slammed the gas, and the car lurched forward, tires squealing as I tore down the road. Tears stung my eyes. I whispered, "Why me? Why me?" over and over, like it might summon an answer. The mask on the passenger seat seemed to glow faintly in the dim light from my dashboard. I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed it with shaking hands and hurled it out the window. It hit the road and shattered into pieces. For a moment, I felt free, lighter. I let out a sharp laugh, half relief, half hysteria. But the next car I passed still had a driver wearing the mask. And the next, and the next. The broken pieces hadn't ended it. If anything, the stares seemed more intent now, more deliberate, as if they knew I'd tried to escape. My stomach twisted with nausea. My hands were slick on the wheel. I thought, maybe I should crash the car. Maybe that's the only way to stop this. But some deeper instinct pushed me on, clinging to the hope that if I just kept driving, I'd find an end. After what felt like hours, lights appeared ahead. Real city lights. Dijon. I almost sobbed. The closer I got, the more cars there were. Dozens, then hundreds. And every single one of them wore the mask. The streets were alive with it. Pedestrians, cyclists, shopkeepers standing in their doorways, masks on every face. The city had become a gallery of white porcelain. I slowed to a crawl, heart battering against my ribs. No one spoke, no one moved suddenly. They all just turned their masked faces toward me as I drove past. I could feel the weight of thousands of empty stares pressing down on me, crushing me. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I drove through the city, out the other side, until the streets emptied again. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. The next car I passed had a normal driver, no mask. My gasp of shock was so loud it startled me. Another car normal. Then another. The people walking along the roadside, normal. My body shook with relief so intense it made me weak. I pulled over, cut the engine, and put my forehead against the steering wheel. My whole body trembled, sobs tearing out of me in ragged bursts. When I finally calmed enough to look up, the road was still quiet. No masked faces. Just people, ordinary people, going about their lives. It was over. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something irreversible. My reflection in the rearview mirror caught my eye. For an instant, just an instant, the face staring back at me wasn't mine. Smooth porcelain, blank eyes, lips too soft. I blinked, and it was gone. Just me again, pale and hollow-eyed from the night's terror. But that moment, that glimpse, told me the truth I hadn't wanted to accept. The mask hadn't been an object. It hadn't been something I found. It had been an invitation, and by touching it, by taking it with me, I had accepted. Maybe I could drive forever and leave it behind. Maybe I could live a normal life, smile at friends, pretend nothing had happened. But somewhere, deep inside, I knew, the mask was part of me now. And someday, when the right road comes, when the night is dark enough, I will be the one staring out through hollow eyes at the next curious traveler who makes the mistake of stopping. Story number 19. I eased the wheel slightly to the left as we entered the Pfaffender Tunnel, my daughter humming quietly in the passenger seat. We'd left Bregenz late, far later than I had planned, and the tunnel was the quickest way through the mountain. She was only 13 then, lanky and restless, kicking her sneakers lightly against the glove compartment. "How long is this one?" she asked, leaning forward like the tunnel might answer her itself. "Just a few kilometers," I told her, trying to sound calm. I always hated tunnels, something about the weight of the mountain pressing down, the sense of no escape. But that night, I was tired enough to ignore the discomfort, at least for the first minute or two. The tunnel swallowed us quickly, the radio losing its signal almost as soon as we entered. Just the hum of the tires and the echo of our engine bouncing off concrete walls. My daughter pulled her jacket tighter, though the air wasn't cold. She asked if she could close her eyes for a while, and I told her, sure, go ahead. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 11:32 p.m. We'd be out before 11:40, no problem. About halfway through, though, my headlights caught something ahead that made my breath catch. Another car. No big deal, I thought at first. But the way it was positioned, slightly angled, not fully in its lane, made me slow down. As we drew closer, the details grew sharper, and I felt a strange tug in my stomach. It was my car. Same model, same dull blue paint. Even the dent on the rear bumper looked identical to mine. My daughter stirred, blinking at the sight. "Dad," she whispered, "that's us." I wanted to tell her no, it just looked similar. Cars get dents all the time, and blue wasn't uncommon. But then the figures inside became visible. Two silhouettes, front seats filled. The driver was me, or someone who wore my face like a mask. The passenger was my daughter, head turned, and she was smiling too wide, her teeth catching the BCs. The glow of our headlights in a way that made them look animal. I hit the brakes hard, the tires screeching against the tunnel floor. My daughter yelped, grabbing the dash. The other car didn't move. The copies of us just sat there, staring, those smiles frozen. It wasn't just that they looked like us, it was that they were us, down to the smallest detail. The same scuff on my jacket collar, the same red scrunchie in her hair. "What is this?" she asked, her voice rising. I didn't answer because I didn't know. My hands shook on the wheel. I thought about reversing out of the tunnel, but the stretch behind us felt impossibly long, darker than it had been a moment ago, as if the tunnel had stretched. The doppelganger me slowly raised his hand from the wheel. Not a wave, not a signal, just lifted it, palm out, like he was pressing it against glass. My daughter whimpered beside me. Then her copy mirrored the gesture, pressing her palm to the window, but with the other hand she pointed directly at my daughter, tapping the glass in slow, deliberate beats. My daughter clutched my arm. "Dad, let's go, please." So I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I pressed the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tires screaming again, and the other car, our car, blinked out. Not like it drove away. It vanished. 1 second it was there. The next, we were staring at an empty stretch of tunnel. I didn't breathe again until we burst out the far end, stars above us and the lake glimmering faintly below the mountain slope. I pulled over immediately, shaking, my chest heaving. My daughter wouldn't look at me. She sat rigid, her face pale, muttering over and over, "It wasn't us. It wasn't us." We sat there for a long time before I could drive again. I tried to rationalize it, some kind of trick of exhaustion, a reflection, headlights bouncing weirdly off tunnel walls. But I couldn't explain the details, the jacket scuff, the scrunchie, the way. Their eyes locked on ours with a knowingness that felt too sharp. That night, we didn't talk much. Once we reached our small hotel, my daughter refused to sleep in her own bed, curling instead at the foot of mine. She woke me 3 times, shaking me, whispering, "Dad." I heard myself laugh. Each time I reassured her, but my own sleep was shallow and full of images I didn't want to remember. The next morning, I decided to test something. Against every instinct in my body, I drove us back toward the tunnel. She didn't want to, begged me not to, but I told her I needed to know. Needed to prove to myself that it was nothing. At 10 a.m. Sunlight sharp and clear, The Pfänder Tunnel looked utterly normal. Cars passed through, commuters, families, tourists. We drove the whole stretch without incident. No other blue car, no copies, no gestures. She cried in relief, but I felt only unease. Because whatever had happened wasn't about the tunnel itself. It was about that night, that exact time, and maybe about us. For years afterward, my daughter wouldn't talk about it. If I brought it up, she'd shut down, change the subject, or leave the room. Then, on her 18th birthday, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo, faded, the kind you get from those disposable cameras teenagers used to carry. It showed the tunnel, and in the faint glow of headlights, two figures sat in a blue car. Us. Or, the other us. I asked her where she'd gotten it. She wouldn't say. She just told me. They weren't smiling in the picture, but I think they wanted to. I still have that photo. Sometimes I wonder if telling this to anyone makes me sound insane. If maybe I've invented it over the years, reshaped it, but the picture proves otherwise. Every so often, late at night, I take it out of the drawer, trace my finger over the faint outline of those faces, and remember the feeling in my chest that night. The sense that something had copied me, but not quite right. I don't drive through tunnels anymore if I can avoid them. My daughter doesn't either. And every time I pass a car that looks like mine, I can't help but glance through the window, half expecting to see myself staring back, grinning too wide, waiting for me to stop. That's the part I never told anyone else. When we left the tunnel, the clock on the dashboard read 12:01. It should have been 11:40. We lost 20 minutes we couldn't explain. My daughter and I remember every second in that tunnel, but the world outside counted differently. Maybe that's why they were smiling, because they know something about us we still don't.
Story number 20. I never believed in curses or spirits before that summer in Trabzon. Archaeology had always been about facts, evidence, and the thrill of uncovering history, not ghost stories. But after what happened during that blood moon in 2003, I'm not so sure anymore. I was working on a dig in Trabzon's historic district, excavating a series of artifacts believed to be linked to the ancient Byzantine era. We had uncovered a small collection of relics, a rusted dagger, some jewelry, pottery shards, and a strange amulet carved from dark stone. The amulet was the most intriguing piece, but also the most unsettling. It felt heavy, almost as if it resisted being held. I mentioned it to my assistant, but we both shrugged it off as superstition. The night of the blood moon, I stayed late at the site, cataloging the artifacts. I was alone, the rest of the team having left earlier. I was drawn to the amulet. Something about its craftsmanship fascinated me. I didn't know the blood moon was special that night. No one had warned me. When I held the amulet up to the moonlight, filtering through the open roof of the dig site, I swear I felt a sharp jolt run through my body. A coldness that wasn't there before. I thought I was just tired or imagining things. Later, when I locked up and walked back to my apartment nearby, I began to notice strange things. The streets, normally quiet at night, felt heavier, almost suffocating. I brushed it off, attributing it to the anxiety of the long day. The next day, the first strange incident happened. One of my colleagues, Hassan, had been helping me catalog the artifacts. He'd touched one of the pottery shards late at night, after midnight. The following morning, Hassan showed up pale, his eyes sunken, and he kept muttering about a shadow watching him. He seemed shaken, but when I asked him what exactly had happened, he couldn't explain it. I figured he'd had a nightmare or maybe was stressed. But then, more odd things started happening. Another team member, Layla, found a small bronze ring among the relics. She wore it on a chain around her neck while she worked. After midnight, she began having terrifying hallucinations. Whispers, scratching sounds, a sense of being followed. She barely slept and refused to touch the artifacts again. She insisted on leaving the dig entirely. I was growing more uneasy, but I still didn't connect these incidents to the relics. I kept telling myself it was all stress, exhaustion, and maybe a shared imagination. Until that night. I'd stayed behind, drawn again to the amulet. I held it carefully, turning it over in my hands, and suddenly I heard it. A faint voice, not quite a whisper, more like a breath against my ear. "Free me." I froze, heart pounding. I told myself it was the wind, the night playing tricks. But the voice came again, more insistent. "Free me." I dropped the amulet. It hit the ground with a dull thud. The air around me grew heavy, oppressive. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted in place. Then I saw it. A figure, just at the edge of my vision, dark and shifting, like smoke, but with the shape of a man. Panic surged through me. I grabbed the amulet and ran out into the street. The figure followed, silently. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment. I locked the door, trembling. The next days were worse. The spirit, if that's what it was, haunted the historic district. Anyone who touched a relic after midnight began to fall ill, their minds unraveling. Hassan was hospitalized with fever and delirium. Layla disappeared, leaving a note that she couldn't stay, and asked me to destroy the artifacts. I researched the amulet and discovered it was linked to an ancient curse. Legend said it imprisoned a vengeful spirit of a betrayed Byzantine nobleman. The curse said anyone who disturbed the relics after dark would unleash the spirit's wrath. Desperate, I gathered the artifacts, hoping to contain them. But the spirit was relentless. One night, as the blood moon rose again, I heard pounding at my door. The air turned frigid. Shadows lengthened, and the voice came again, angrier. I realized the spirit wasn't just haunting those who touched the relics. It was targeting me because I had disturbed its prison. The only way to end it was to return the artifacts to where I found them and perform a ritual I uncovered in an ancient manuscript buried with the relics. A ritual to bind the spirit back to its prison. That night, under the blood moon, I went back to the dig site. I placed each artifact carefully in its original position. As I recited the words from the manuscript, the air thickened, and the dark figure appeared again, swirling around me, furious. But as I finished the ritual, the figure slowed, then dissipated like smoke in the wind. The oppressive weight lifted instantly. I stayed until dawn, making sure the spirit was truly gone. Since then, no one has touched the relics after midnight. I left Trabzon soon after, haunted by what I saw and felt. But I never doubted again that some things in history are better left undisturbed, especially when the blood moon rises.
Story number 21.
The carnival had been the talk of our town for weeks. But when it suddenly shut down one afternoon, everything changed. I was only 8, and I remember feeling something strange, like the excitement that once buzzed around the carnival had been snuffed out in an instant. Nobody knew why it closed so abruptly. There were rumors, of course. Some said the owners ran off with the money, others whispered about accidents. But no one really talked about what happened afterward. Except me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My curiosity got the better of me, and I convinced myself that if I just snuck in, I might find out what was going on. So, after everyone else was asleep, I slipped out of my house and headed toward the carnival grounds. The gate was locked, but I found a spot where the fence was loose and crawled under. The moment I was inside, the silence hit me hard. No lights, no music, just empty rides creaking in the faint breeze. I moved cautiously between the stalls, trying to make sense of it all. That's when I saw the tents, dark and still. But one tent caught my eye. It was the biggest one, with a faded sign that said, "The Hall of Mirrors." The entrance flap was slightly open, almost inviting me in. I stepped inside, and the air felt colder, heavier. The mirrors inside weren't like the usual funhouse ones. They looked like deep pools, reflecting not just my face, but something else. Shadows flickered behind the glass. I was about to step back when I heard laughter. Soft, but chilling. It wasn't a child's laugh. It was high-pitched, forced, and it came from behind the mirrors. Then, out of nowhere, I saw them. Clowns. But not the kind you'd want to see at a birthday party. Their faces were painted with wide, cruel smiles, their eyes cold and empty. They weren't moving like people. It was more like they were trapped, or worse, waiting. Before I could react, one of them stepped out of a mirror as if climbing out of water. His smile stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. He whispered my name. I froze, heart pounding. But something about him made me want to listen. "You came back," he said. "We've been waiting for someone like you." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. They started to surround me, their laughter echoing in my ears, filling the tent. One clown reached out, his fingers brushing my arm, cold as ice. Suddenly, I felt myself pulled forward, as if the mirrors were swallowing me. I fought against it, but the glassy surface was like a trap. Inside the mirror world, everything was twisted. Faces of other children appeared, trapped and silent, their eyes begging for help. The clowns told me they collected lost souls, like a carnival game, but the prize was freedom. For them. The longer someone stayed, the more their soul got tangled in the mirrors, unable to leave. I realized I was at risk of becoming one of them. Desperation pushed me to act. I remembered the one thing the clowns feared, the light from outside. I screamed for help, banging on the mirror surface. The clowns hissed and recoiled as light spilled in from the tent's opening. I pushed myself through the glass, breaking free just as the tent flap slammed shut behind me. Outside, everything felt different. The carnival was silent again, but the shadows in the mirrors inside the tent remained, locked away. I never told anyone what I saw that night. The carnival never reopened, and the Hall of Mirrors was torn down. But sometimes, when I pass the old site, I swear I hear faint laughter and see flickers of those cruel smiles, reminding me that some doors, once opened, never truly close.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.